Okay. The meeting in the North Smithfield Budget Committee is now called to order at 5:30. Well, no, wait a minute. It's not quite 5:30.
No, that's slow.
Oh, is it slow?
By myself, thank you.
Yeah, 5:30 p.m. First order of business, roll call. Nate, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Valley? Here. Mr. Pachetti? Not here.
Nope.
Mr. Clifford?
Here?
Mr. Zambrano?
Here.
Ms. Nada? I'm here.
Okay, second item on the agenda, old business. School Department FY 2013-14 budget discussion. Vote may be, action may be taken. The first sub-item is budget review with the school department personnel. Can you give us 1 minute to grab our documents? Okay. Does anybody need the summary? MJ, do you have the summary number 8? Do you need that?
I'll share.
Okay, because I got another copy.
His L now.
Okay. Can we change the record to show that Mr. Pichetti arrived? Well, thank you very much for coming. We do appreciate your being here tonight, and we're looking forward to having some good dialogue and getting some answers. It was rather difficult for us to write any type of report to submit to the town by the deadline that we had to, without having had the opportunity to have a face-to-face meeting and get some answers to questions that we had submitted. So it was, when we wrote that report, you know, we had to write it without the benefit of having met to get some answers, and we based it on the assumptions that we had in front of us and the facts that we had in front of us at the time. I would like to address one thing for the point of clarification with regard to our report. Mr. Lindbergh sent an email this morning, and I'll let you paraphrase what your concern is about this evening's meeting. I don't want to choose your words. You can choose them for yourself. So if you could just explain that to the audience, please.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Clifford. Appreciate the opportunity to meet with you. However, as I explained to Mr. Clifford, we'll do our best to answer your follow-up questions tonight. There's a detailed report coming out Thursday to the school committee, actually both through and by them, as well as other people, that basically responds to your budget committee report submitted on April 15th. So that will be presented Thursday night and in turn turned over to the town council at that time. So tonight, some of my answers may be abbreviated because some of your possible questions have been answered and then some to a great degree in the report. If I may, Mr. Clifford, too, just about tonight, as I expressed to you, my concern was that we didn't have your follow-up questions. And, we kind of went back and forth, and we did acquiesce to meet with you tonight to try and hear your follow-up concerns. But given the 22 pages of responses that we provided to your 64 interrogatories and all the backup data attached, I'm just a little reluctant in terms of not having your questions ahead of time. So I kind of wanted to go on record, and honestly, we had preferred to have them ahead of time, only because that was the original pattern that I was following with your questions. We responded, and then you had follow-ups. So I understand you have follow-up questions, and basically the areas you cited are 19 out of 22 pages that we gave you. So we'll do our best, but we would have preferred to have your follow-up questions.
And just as I just want to note too, that when I responded to that email, I did make note that the other 16 department heads who appeared before us, we did not provide them with any questions in advance. They were very relaxed, they were very comfortable, and they were able to answer the majority of the questions that we posed on the spot. And on the rare occurrence that they didn't have the answer, they did provide it to us by email within a couple of days. So it worked out well. So I don't think, I think as we progress, I think you might see that since you already have our original questions, and it's just as I described, we need to have some dialogue about the answers to make sure that we're interpreting them correctly, and for you to push, kind of point us into another direction where the second part of that question might be available. So
Mr.
I'm anticipating it'll go well.
Sure, just, I will, honestly, we'll do our best. Just, if you could just make note of the fact that this quote, department, unquote, represents $23 million in
Yep.
2,300 line items. I don't know if you have another department that you met with that has 2,300 line items.
Yep.
And I don't know if another department you met with has 100 line items. So please, it's not apples to apples, and so just sitting here and discussing any line item out of 2,300 line items is simply not the same, okay?
We certainly understand that.
Thank you for understanding.
And we were actually hoping for more than, to get more than one meeting scheduled for this week, because in the email that we sent April 9th, we did ask for 2 or 3 dates, because we understood you had a very lengthy budget, and, we need to plow through it, but I don't think it's going to all be accomplished in one meeting tonight. So hopefully, maybe at the end of this meeting, we can determine a better way to move forward that would be more expedient. Maybe, we can come to some, maybe we could involve a subcommittee of the school committee and a subcommittee of you people and a subcommittee of us, and we can have more meetings with less difficulty of scheduling them, since we're not involving as many
That's a good
conflicts.
idea, actually,
Yeah.
good idea. As a matter of fact, if you could take that up after the report comes out Thursday, that might even be something your group might want to consider in
Yeah.
terms of a follow-up, once you get that report saying, okay.
Yeah,
looks
well,
like-
we've been open to that all along. We're trying to schedule some meetings during the day with just a sub.
We are too.
So, okay, since you are going to be discussing our report on Thursday, I just wanted to clarify a few things. I'm not asking for you to comment on them or have dialogue, but I just want to make it clear. One thing that I read in the paper, I want to make it clear that we're not questioning whether or not revenues were recorded in the financial reporting system of the school department. Clearly they were, or they wouldn't have shown up in the audit report. What we're concerned about is that revenue needs to show up in the budget at the beginning of the process, so we can count on that revenue to offset some expenses. So just for clarification, if I read something into someone's comment and I think they might be confused, but they're not, that's fine. But just in the event that that's what they're thinking we're discussing, it's not quite the same issue.
But that's not what was said, but that's.
Okay.
That's not what was said in the paper.
Okay.
So we'll see what that's.
Yeah. And also, with our budget that we submitted, we didn't quite finish up on the revenue. And even the email that I sent you saying what we did approve, it didn't include the non-public transportation credit, which RIDE considers somehow revenue, but as our understanding is, it's a credit offset. So we didn't list that as what you're going to receive, because we weren't quite sure how it was to be accounted for, whether it should show up in the revenue or as a credit within a line item. So that needs to
Do
be.
you want that answer now? Or?
No, we don't have to. Well, you can if you want,
I
but.
can answer it. It is, shows up as a credit on our invoices, so what it does is reduce our expenditures.
Right, but I meant within the budget, how should it be accounted for? Should it be accounted as a revenue because RIDE considers it a revenue, even though it's a non-cash? Or should it be a footnote to a line item in the budget and show up as a credit as, say, for example, the E-rate credit shows up throughout the budget in the document, in the detail section and on the line item? So that's what I meant by how we should.
It should show up in the justification of the budget. It is a credit off the expenditures. It's an offset to the expenditures. It's not a revenue.
So it should show up in the detail section of the budget, referencing it as an offset. Okay. Okay.
And I apologize if we didn't do that. It certainly wasn't in addition to the budget.
Right.
It was considered when we budgeted
Right.
the line.
Well, we've thought it best before we, put those revenue figures in that we had questions on, or the credits, that actually it would be helpful to do that at a meeting with you and the superintendent certainly, and the auditor if you choose, and our auditor, the town's auditor, and, 1 or 2 members of this committee, and then we can kind of decide how these things are supposed to be reported. And the other thing was dealing with the credits too, as we're speaking about them. We listed 4 on in the bullet in that the budget report, describing the need to have all the credits listed and within the report. And again, we kind of did this in a vacuum because we didn't have the ability to have these questions answered then. But of the 4 that we listed, I think we listed the non-public transportation credit and the E-rate credit and the public textbook credit and the transportation fuel credit. I want to make it clear that we understand that 2 of those 4 do show up in the detail of the budget under those accounts, especially the E-rate, because it's kind of all over the place, because that cost is allocated over 5 different budgets, I think it is. So on each section of the detail, it's a footnote there. We couldn't find the footnotes for the one that I mentioned previously, the non-public transportation credit. We did see it when we got your invoice, but in the budget itself we didn't. And the transportation fuel credit for $60-something thousand, we couldn't find that listed in the budget anywhere. So our point in making that statement in the thing was, it would be very helpful if we, and if it's in there, apologize, we couldn't find it, but it would be helpful if, when we got the budget next time, along with the revenue sheet, we were provided just a simple index of other credits that show up in the budget, or even putting an asterisk next to that line item so we can know if the number doesn't look right, it's offset by a credit somewhere.
Okay, the transportation fuel credits, I think we addressed that in the report that we'll be sending to you. The transportation fuel is not a credit against our fuel. What happens is we purchase fuel for the state, and they reimburse us based on those invoices. So we don't receive any credits for anything that we do. It's just them reimbursing us for what was paid on their behalf. In the, as far as the non-public textbooks goes, we provide textbooks for, I think, 4 or 5 subjects, and the state reimburses.
But that is in there. You do footnote that.
Okay.
So I wasn't questioning that. It was the 2, the non-public transportation credit and the transportation fuel credit. So, and I don't know, and we didn't know, if there were other credits in here that there aren't footnotes for that maybe should be, because, as we said, some numbers in the budget, when we look at the actual expenditure date to the amount that was budgeted, it doesn't look like it should at that point in the year. So we're thinking maybe some of those numbers are caused by a credit offset. So that's all we were saying. And the third issue is, we did put a statement in our report suggesting that several of these suggestions obviously need to be referred and reviewed by legal counsel, because we're not sure if they can be done legally. I mean, we've spoke with the auditor and got his opinion from an accounting standpoint, but certainly it's a footnote in there that, legal counsel needs to be involved to review them. We're not suggesting that anybody break a law or make up their own law. We want to see if legally some of these ideas could be implemented. So I just want, for the sake of your conversation on Thursday, if that wasn't clear in the report, and again, from what I've heard, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page and we understand what our intent was.
It wasn't clear in your report at all, no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Let's get started. Do you mind if we just proceed with, would you rather just start by the questions in the order that they are on these pages, and we can...
Okay, that's your pleasure. We'll do our best to go along.
What page you on?
Okay. On the questions, I've got a copy for you if you need it. Oh, wait a minute.
Al, can you share with...
I'll share it with John. I'm all set. I got a copy here, somewhere.
Here you go. Here's your... Okay. Okay. On the first question, having to do with the way that the fuel costs are budgeted for North Smithfield Elementary School and the North Smithfield High School, we understood that it had to do, we assumed, I guess, that it had to do with the bond repayment, because it did look like those numbers were extremely high. And we assumed that you were budgeting those figures so that you would be able to put together the money needed to reimburse the town for the bond payment. So I guess, is that a correct assumption? It sounded like from your answer that it is. So, putting aside the issue of the bond payment, if we didn't have the bond payment as an issue, what would be numbers that you would be comfortable with for heat and electric costs for North Smithfield Elementary and for the other school? I mean, would it be fair to just take the FY12 actual and, add some type of factoring in the cost and current prices for those items, or?
Sure, if I may.
Yeah.
Thank you. Understanding the concept behind the performance-based contract and all the data that you were given, it is considered a zero-neutral approach. So to answer your question, because by contract we're required to budget by FY09 usage, but we do our best to get the most competitive rate for the commodity. If the performance bond contract or lease bond revenue was picked up by the town, there would be, number one, additional expenses that I don't think we recognized in the data that we provide. We have a requirement for measurement and verification by Johnson Controls annually. We also pay what's called an owner's rep on measurement and verification. They would have to be covered. And honestly, you may have some serious legal issues that you would have to check with several people on, not just Johnson Controls. But my guess is bond counsel,
Right,
as
yeah.
well as RIDE, Department of Ed, because it would now be a substantial change
Yeah.
in the approach. So to answer your question, we could then budget by FY12 or whatever the updated usages would be, times the commodity rate that we get.
Okay. Could you just email us within the next couple of days what you think those numbers should be?
Honestly, no. I think we'll just move on to the report. I think it just, at this point, more data just isn't helpful. I think you want the FY09, you have the FY09 usage, you're asking for the FY12 usage. At this point, I don't want to get into that. I'd rather have you read the report.
Well, we don't know how many gallons of oil that represents, so how could we adjust it to current price or kilowatt hours?
You do have the estimate of the usage for, again, what you have is the commodity price. You have the FY09 uses that we're required to go by. So.
Okay.
So right now, I think that's a reasonable request, but right now, if we could, I don't want to get into further requests for more data. As it is, we have a stack here added to this. And it's just at this point where we need to move on. And if that comes up at a joint meeting, no problem. But right now,
Okay.
I don't want to go back and commit.
We'll be happy to calculate it ourselves, but
Sure.
I would have felt more comfortable with you providing us the number rather than us giving you a
I'm
number.
not saying that we won't eventually. I think right now, I just think considering the over 102 documents and the 64 interrogatories and more, I think we've got a lot of other work to do. And maybe at the joint meeting, if there is one, you can make that request and we'll give you the data. I can't commit to it right now, that's all.
I think, can you calculate that? You'd be able to calculate that one.
I probably could. There's kind of a difference of opinion as to how we're looking at this. I've read the entire Johnson Controls contract, and I see what you're talking about the baseline. But the baseline contract under this energy services contract is purely for setting the baseline rate for usage so that Johnson Controls can calculate your savings, not so that the school department should budget at the dollar level of 2009, because your actual expenditures have decreased each year through fiscal 10, 11, 12, and currently, through all of your actual reports, because I've got all the prior year actual dollars. I've looked at that. I don't have usage. But the dollars are going down. But you're continuing to budget at a level of 2009 dollars, which is about $300,000 higher than what you're actually expending now from what I see. And this contract doesn't provide for you to budget dollars at that level. All it says is that Johnson Controls is able to track the usage at the 2009 level to see whether you are in fact saving money over the baseline usage in terms of your current usage, but doesn't relate anything to dollars from what I see. So that's where we're running into a problem.
So I just respectfully disagree. According to my understanding of it, we are required to budget at FY09 usage. And what we do is we get as competitive.
You see what you just said though, usage, not dollars. But you're including the dollars in your budget. There's a difference in there. The only usage, because usage doesn't have to do with your budget. What's happening is your budget dollars seem to be inflated, so your maintenance of effort is consistently higher over the 3 or 4 years because of the higher utility dollars from 2009. So what's happening is you're not budgeting realistic dollars
I think
for the
we need to tell
savings
the
that
whole
you're seeing.
story. We need to tell the whole story of the contract, if I may. It's required to budget an FY09 usage in order to reflect the savings of a commitment of $3.4 million in the
Correct, but
budget.
that's for calculation
Hold on a
purposes,
minute.
to make sure that your contract terms are being upheld.
We took on the risk then of paying that lease bond payment from the school department budget. If you're asking for us to do it differently, then how do you think the lease bond payment is going to be paid? That was part of.
That's why we're working on
That's-
something aside from that, so that
That's great.
potentially the town can assume the lease bond payments so that you can get back to
But they'll also have to
budgeting what you
include
should
the
be.
measurement and verification costs
Right.
in their budget. And they also have to check with bond council around the lease bond
Right.
revenue statement.
Right.
And so all the things are already.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we fully understand that RIDE has to be involved in a legal decision here, and then an attorney has to be. And I actually already did confer with 2 people at RIDE to get their preliminary opinion. So we know, Steve,
I'm sorry, I
that,
didn't hear Mr.
I'm sorry,
Pacelli's
can we
question.
stay on focus?
I didn't know if you had a question.
No, I'm talking to John.
Well, can we keep to one conversation so that we all stay focused, please? So we do fully understand that that's an issue that's going to need the legal opinions and the auditor's opinions on. So it was just a concept that we would like explored and to see if we can do it.
I'm
And
supportive of it. Explore it, but make sure you explore it so that the town isn't subjected to any more legal
Yeah.
charges, as well as you want to cover the measurement and verification.
absolutely,
Absolutely
absolutely.
wonderful idea. If you
Okay.
can get it done,
Okay, good,
Wonderful idea.
good, okay. So we'll calculate then, if the bond payment were out and we use the actual, we'll do the best to calculate the usages. Did Mr. Erickson have something to do with that? Does he,
actually, it was the school department. that
yeah, but doesn't
initiated-
he monitor something or something? I thought he,
He's gonna finish. It was actually the school department, with the initiative of a community citizen, Mr. Perry, that got this off the ground. Mr. Erickson jumped in and thought it was a great idea, and I believe the town did wonderful with it, but the town was 100%, I believe, I defer to Ms. Hamilton, I think 100% of their improvements were paid through ARA. And we couldn't tap that bucket. So
Okay.
we went lease bond. And I think it's a credit to the school department because those $3.4 million capital improvements were probably in the capital budget for,
number of years.
no, you don't think so?
No, I said a number of
Oh,
years, I'm guessing.
A number of years.
Yeah.
So it's a credit to people like Mr. Kopaz, Mr. Perry, and that they took the initiative to help themselves because it was a huge initiative and turned out to be great. So, if you can accomplish that, that would be wonderful.
Well, we'd like you to work with us on trying to accomplish that.
We'll be glad to
And-
work
yeah,
with you. Just
okay.
want to make sure you kind of.
No, we
Absolutely.
absolutely. Okay, the next question has to do with the, well, I think we can, are there any other questions other than the one that we just posed on the, question number 1 with regard to the technicalities of how we're going to do this, if you can do that, obviously has to take place in another forum with other peoples and parties, and we'll do that. But for right now, is there any other technical question regarding a number or anything that anybody has to ask, or are we okay to move on? If we're okay to move on, then question number 2, I'll read it for the audience, for those who don't have this sheet in front of them. I feel kind of uncomfortable discussing something that you people might not have in front of you. FY14 private school out-of-district transportation costs are budgeted at $67,500. FY12 actual expenditures were $57,166 when $90,000 was budgeted. The FY13 budgeted amount is $67,500. FY year-to-date expenditures are stated as $18,287. Please explain why so little has been paid to date for FY13. And the response is, we are paid through January, we pay off invoices. These charges are subject to constant change during the year based upon the number of students riding the bus from North Smithfield, as well as other communities, changes in bus routes, bus stops, etc., which all reflect rates on an ongoing basis. We also received an offset to that account in November and December. This offset is not known ahead of time. We cannot project, nor can we anticipate as annual or continuing. Now, that credit is the non-public, is that the credit that you're referring to? We also receive an offset. That actually is the non-public, what is that? Which credit is that? What is that referred to? Is that the one that shows up in the school aid, or is this, what is this credit, and where would?
The out-of-district transportation is billed based on the number of students that are on the bus at any time, and
Right.
the locations they travel
Right.
to, so it's constantly changing.
Yeah. But I know that, but what I'm saying is, when you reference, we also received an offset to that account in November and December.
The offset
It-
can go either way.
But wait a minute, the offset is the reimbursement for it, correct? Is that the non-public private school credit? Is that what you're referring to?
No, that's an offset based on the number of students that are on the bus and where their traveling locations are. It's a calculation that they use at RIDE.
Okay, but the,
Go back and get it.
The offset can go either way. I think maybe we use the word that, offset, you think of kind of a rebate. It could go either way depending on the number of kids in the bus.
okay, as I look at the invoice that you gave us from RIDE, it lists private school busing expense, and then a dollar amount, and then a non-public transportation state offset of $5,243 for that period of time. That was that on that month, if I'm looking at this invoice that you provided us with. So I guess my question is, does this offset, referred to as the non-public transportation state offset, is that what they refer to in their revenue sheets that they provide us for anticipated revenue for the next coming year as the all other categoricals breakdown?
No, the categorical for the entire year for FY13 was $16,948.
And that was for which portion of the categoricals? Because there's two components to that.
Non-public transportation.
Okay, so is this part of that $16,000 that they give you incrementally?
No, I don't believe it is.
Well, what would it be then?
I'll have to revisit that, to be honest with you.
Okay, because our understanding was, and that's why, again, we said we don't know where that credit shows up for the non-categoricals, and they do call it a non-public transportation offset. And we're assuming that private school out-of-district transportation is a non-public. So if that's the case, and you got a $16,000 credit that you're attributing to that line item, then is that line item supposed to be budgeted the full amount, or at an amount that would reflect the credit that you know you're going to get when you get your state aid funding formula?
We base that line item on estimates and trends over the years. There's many unknowns at the time that we budget that, as we've mentioned to you. We
Right.
don't know the routes, we don't know how many children are going to be on the bus.
No, I'm not questioning the ability to judge what the routes are and what the cost is going to be for the route itself. I'm questioning why that credit doesn't show up somewhere within the budget, or if it does, can you explain to me where in the budget detail we would find that credit? And you don't say who it's from, you just said we also received an offset to that account in November and December, and I'm assuming that this is the offset you're talking about because it refers to it as an offset. So how would we know, unless we saw that the numbers didn't match, how would we know that there was any type of credit coming in on that account? Well, how should we recognize that?
You don't know until you're in the year doing it. That's it. That's the whole point. You're looking for some type of upfront credit from the Department of Ed. The concept is that they run the out-of-district transportation.
Right.
We do our best to project that amount. But we don't know the students on those routes. We don't know the students from other schools on those routes. We don't know the mileage on those routes. And it changes throughout the year. And so you know, if you're looking to kind of pigeonhole that more exactly, we're not
No,
able to.
Steve, I don't mean it that way. I know that you can't predict the routes and how many students and what all the rates are. But when you're provided the governor's financial aid package report for the upcoming school year, it lists your operational revenue. Do you have it in front of you, Lisa? Yeah, and then it will list your group home tuition reimbursement, your group home payment, whatever they want to refer that to. And then there is the category of all categoricals. And it's our understanding that that all categoricals is made up of two components. And one of those components is a credit that the RIDE provides to you for the private school out-of-district transportation. And that's what I think that credit is that shows up on your invoice, which you don't identify who it's by or what it is. So what I'm saying is, when you do find out, or when you build your budget and put in a number for the out-of-district transportation that the state is going to provide, I'm assuming that you basically base it off of last year's routes and last year's numbers, which I'm not disputing how you do it. But then I'm saying that when you build the budget, if you know you're going to get a credit when you see the governor's aid package, why wouldn't you note somewhere that this is going to be far less than we put here because it's going to be offset by a credit of, you said for this year it's 16,000 or something. I mean, I know there's a small component for high-cost special ed education, and it's like $800 or something, I think, for last year, if I remember correct. And the balance of it was the credit for the private school out-of-district transportation. So that, I'm saying, is when you put together the budget, if the bus routes you're predicting are going to cost $67,000, then automatically, if you know you're getting $16,000 as a credit on that, why wouldn't you reduce that line item to $50,000? Because when we look at this and see that it was budgeted at 67 and you've only spent $18,000 to date, it tells us that something else is going on here. And then when we asked that question, you did give us an invoice that had those offsets. So now it's kind of making sense to us as to why that number for actual year-to-date expenditures is so low. But if we had known that up front, you know, we think somewhere that credit needs to be recognized, either as a revenue, even though the state calls it a revenue, it's not cash, I don't know why they determined it to be a revenue, but either in the revenue section or as a credit against that cost. Because if I'm correct, then I'm assuming that that $67,000 cost that you identified for the bus routes, if your bus routes were accurate, and that's what you actually end up running the routes on this year, you're not going to end up spending $67,500. If you're getting a credit for 16, you'll spend about $50.
Okay, in total, our non-public transportation, our budget is like $400,000. I'm sure that we did, I will revisit it. I can't recall off the top of my head, but I'm sure we did consider that when we budgeted that line. The increase for FY14 over the offset for the year before was $9,000.
Okay, and it looks like this coming year, the offset is going to be about $25,000.
Correct, that's
Okay.
$9,000 above this.
Right. So,
For $400,000.
okay, so I guess what we're saying is,
Come on,
So
move
that's
on.
what, 9,000 off the $400,000?
yeah, what's the $400,000? Because,
That's our total out-of-district transportation.
but I'm talking about the ones that are under contract with the state.
That's all
Okay,
out-of-district.
right. But that $25,000 for the next year is supposed to be for the private school out-of-district transportation, correct?
It's for non-public transportation.
Which would be for private schools, because every other school is, a charter school is a public school, I thought.
No, charter, special ed, vocational, and private.
So all of them, so
No,
we're
I don't
talking
think
about
so.
$9,000 out of $400,000?
No, I don't think,
I get it.
maybe if we meet with someone from RIDE, we can agree on how to interpret that. Okay. Understood the other questions following that, but we still have a question with that offset. When we move down to the charter school out-of-district transportation, our question was, for FY14, charter school out-of-district transportation costs were budgeted at $101,700. FY12 actual expenditures show as $28,435. FY13 budget amount is $108,042, with the actual expenditures to date as $14,930. So again, it looks to us like this line item is grossly over budgeted. And when we looked at the spreadsheet, the budget, actually, when we got the prior year history, I'm referring to, you call it budget document number 8. When we look at this and we read across, in FY12 you spent $28,435. In this year you're budgeting $108,000, but you've only spent to date $14,000. So if we take that $14,000 and break it down by the number of months that represents and annualize that cost, predicting what the outcome is going to be by the end of the year, we think it's going to end up somewhere around $27,000. So I don't know why we have to budget $101 for it. To us, that appears to be an item that's about $70,000 over budgeted for next year.
Are you addressing these items as well in that, or going to in that report that comes out?
Yes.
So, and I did, when I got the questions from you and the answers, and the invoices, I did meet with, as you know, Steve, I met with someone at RIDE, and 2 people actually, and spoke to them about these accounts. And I questioned, how are we supposed to budget for this when it seems to be, by the description provided, that there's quite a variable? And the answer was, that I heard, was that yes, there's a variable in that, you know, kids will drop in and drop out, and there are other communities sending that are on this bus. But there shouldn't be any major change from one year to the other unless there's a new charter school that opens in the area and there's a ton of kids going to it, or a charter school closes. And when I asked the point-blank question, well, how should we budget for next year? The answer that they gave me was, unless there's a new charter school opening or you see something dramatic on the horizon with charter school transportation, you might go with a 4% increase or something similar to that. And they actually told me that there's a cap, I guess, on the contract, that is if the route stayed the same for next year and the number of participants were the same, the maximum it would go up is by 4%. So this looks to us like it's over budgeted by $70,000. And the other 2 seem to be in line. The vocational technical transportation, those were budgeted at lower numbers, $39,000 the actual expense was in FY12. The budget for the FY13, you budgeted $35,000. You've expended about $22,000. And it looks to us like that might be a little over budget, might end up around $39,000 or $40,000. And the other one for the private school out-of-district transportation looks to be maybe in the ballpark, but we're still wondering about that $25,000 offset. And maybe this is a conversation we have to have with RIDE.
We had a conversation with RIDE.
No, I mean, you in the room, me in the room, and RIDE in the room. Not just, maybe it's not helpful for me to go down there and speak with them and then for you to speak with them. Maybe we all need to hear the same thing from the same person.
Yeah, that probably would have been possible when you decided to go down and visit. We would have gladly gone with you, however, we weren't invited. However, we did get a detailed report from the person that you spoke to.
She told me she was going to send
And
something.
that, I don't want to use her name or gender, but, because the person asked that you not refer to that person or quote that person in any way. All I know is that the person really made it clear that out of the 22 pages that you reviewed with her, apparently she confirmed almost 100% of our responses. So I'm wondering.
No, I don't think she did.
I'm wondering where the misrepresentation.
Yeah, I don't know what she told you. And
I guess we'll have to kind of look into that.
Yeah, I would like to meet, again, I would like to meet with that individual, with you and Lisa and 2 of us, and we'll go over it, because very clearly, she said, and I said to her, I'm so happy that you said that, because I was beginning to think we must be crazy here by not understanding why that cost would go from 30 to 101 in 1 year with no significant changes. So, I'll be happy to go with you, really will. Okay. We're not going to get anywhere with this, so we'll move on.
Well,
Until everybody's in the room.
We responded to that appropriately. Okay. I think you're looking at trending. You also ignored the point that Lisa made that we often get substantial invoices at the end of the year to settle up on contracts. And so he didn't bring that up. And I think other than that, I think you can go on record saying it's over budget by $70,000 and we'll see. But also, I don't think it's at all reasonable for you to think you can trend out of district, private school, public school, charter schools over a 3-year period. Not at all. Simply because there's a new charter school that isn't open, do you think that it's not going to increase? You were given information that clearly shows a substantial increase in students going to both Woonsocket and Beacon. So that's going to affect our rates. So.
Well, why would you, hearing that answer, then my question back would be, if you only spent $28,000 in FY12, what event was happening that you thought that it would go up to $108,000 for this year? Was there a new charter school that opened, or
Yes, there was.
which one?
The Rhode Island Transition High School.
And how many kids go to that?
From this
From-
district,
From our district?
1.
Okay, so that's not going to impact
You know
tremendously?
where it is?
No. But is that under special ed transportation or regular ed?
Special ed.
Okay, so that's a different ballgame altogether. This is charter school transportation for regular ed. So anyway, we'll, hopefully, maybe we can get together and have a meeting with those people, and we'll agree to, if you want to agree to it, we'll agree to go with the numbers that they agree to. So,
You know what, Mr. Clifford, I'm not going to sit here and make any deals with you, or you agree, I agree. We'll just kind of
okay,
continue and see where we
okay,
go.
okay. What I meant by that was, with our relationship with the town and those departments, we actually met with them and then privately met with each department director and told them what our recommendation was going to be for the line items, and asked if they were comfortable living in that. So the budgets that we came up with for the town municipal departments were kind of a consensus. I mean, and I think the one that took the biggest hit was probably the police department. We reduced his significantly, met with the chief and explained to him what we were doing, and we said, is this going to impact the public safety? Are you going to be provide the services? And can you live with this? And he very generously said, yeah, we can live with that. So what I'm saying is, with the other departments, we tried to come to a mutual agreement as to, yeah, we can support that and you can live with that. And that's what if you're not interested, you know what I'm saying, that's what we were trying to suggest we could do.
Oh, no, we could talk about that, but the school committee should be present, and at the same time, we could probably talk about, the 5 major categories under your core and PPP deficiencies and all of the things that we're.
Okay. On the charter school, one other follow-up question. On the response that you provided us on page 4, it says, we expect an overage in this account for FY13 and will be applying this to shortages in the ODD account, regular ed transportation accounts. Did you mean, I don't understand that answer. Is regular ed transportation and ODD are two different things, huh?
District.
Right. But is there such a thing as out-of-district regular education transportation account?
No, we're referring to the vocational and the charter. The vocational. We have a shortage in the vocational.
Okay. Okay, I couldn't figure out what it was referring to. I'm sorry. Okay, fourth question. In FY12, the budgeted amount for transportation fuel was $107,996, and the actual expenditure for FY12 was $100,926. $163,940 was budgeted in FY13, with year-to-date expenditures stated as $68,000. FY14 proposed is $152,876. All years were budgeted based on consumption of 40,000 gallons. And you provided us an answer, which explained the processing, but then you said, we asked for a statement from the company indicating the number of gallons purchased in FY11, FY12, and FY13 year-to-date. And you said, we're not going to pursue a statement from the company at this time. A summary is provided to you based upon the records. And then the summary, I guess, is we typically pre-buy 40,000 gallons for use, which all of the detailed budgets in all of those documents refer to 40,000 gallons. And then it says, as of 1/31/2013, we've purchased 35,088 gallons of fuel for $128,867, and we've received credits from RIDE for their use of 15,838 gallons in the amount of $60,867. So where does the credit from RIDE show up in the budget when you provide us with these numbers? At the
Again,
beginning of the budget cycle, because we couldn't find any reference to that credit.
Again, the RIDE credit is, they're just reimbursing us for the fuel that they've purchased.
Right, but this isn't RIDE.
What is that, RIDE?
What's not right?
We couldn't find that as a RIDE credit on the any reference to that type of transportation fuel credit.
The RIDE credit comes in on the transportation bills. We transfer it to the fuel line because that's where it belongs.
Okay, but the transportation fuel bill, the transportation,
I think what Mike's getting at
We
is
don't get
when
them every month.
we're budgeting, we're comparing it to your expenditure and doing some analysis on that. We're trying to see some correlations. And in doing the budget, okay, it should show up as either an expenditure offset or a revenue to offset the full amount of the total expenditure on the other side of the budget. We don't see either.
So the expenditures that you see in our budget are only for our fuel purchases, for our students. It's not for the out of district. We don't include expenditures in there for the RIDE fuel. We could do that. If we did do that, then we will certainly show you the offset for the credit.
does anybody have the bus company, the first ride, or first ride, or whatever it's called, invoice? Okay. I don't get it, Lisa, and I don't mean to be difficult by saying that, but I don't understand why RIDE, you said in the budget detail and the narrative that you typically buy 40,000 gallons. You break it down by the cost of each gallon, and you said we typically buy that many gallons. And then, then we get when we ask the question, why has so little been spent on a big ticket item like that, because we assumed that more would have been spent, we're told that you got a credit in the amount of $60,867 for 15,000 gallons. And I don't see anywhere on the RIDE website where they issue any type of credits for transportation fuel, and I still don't get where you're saying that credit shows up, either on an invoice or in a budget.
It is on the invoice. It shows up on the invoice.
Which invoice?
I don't have it. I would have to.
No, I mean, the which invoice? I mean, the first,
The transportation invoice
okay, from which company? For a student?
from First Student.
Okay, but that's not RIDE.
I'm sorry, from RIDE.
It's,
The student's the provider of the state transportation.
it's not on the invoice from RIDE either.
It doesn't appear every month. I can get those for you.
Totaling the $60,000? Okay, great, okay. And again, it's confusing to us because in the budget detail, it didn't say anything about, but we're going to get a credit. So if you're going to get a credit for 60, and you're saying you need 153, but you know you're getting a credit for 60, then budget 90.
We don't budget for RIDE.
We don't budget for RIDE. That's not how it works. They
Well,
ask.
the problem
Thank
is,
you.
when we're looking at it, doing an expenditure analysis for prior years, and we see actual expenditures that are significantly lower than what you're budgeting, we ask a question. And when we ask a question, in this case, when we did, we've got an answer in that there's supposedly an offset or a credit for that fuel. In your budget, that doesn't appear anywhere, and the budget looks as if fuel is budgeted at a significantly higher amount. So we question why the higher amount as opposed to your actual expenditure analysis for prior years in that area.
Okay.
That's how we get to this point. So that's all that Mike, I think, is trying to explain, is that we don't see it in the budget. it should be explained somewhere in there so that we can understand how you're budgeting. Are you budgeting the full expenditure and an offset elsewhere? Are you budgeting revenue somewhere with the full expenditure? Are you budgeting the expenditure at a lower amount to account for the offset? None of that is explained in there, and that's a fairly good ticket, high-ticket item when we're comparing it to prior years, and we're just wondering why. That's all.
And, I mean, a credit in the amount of $60,000 year-to-date should be showing up somewhere. I mean, you had to know you were going to be, you know, that the cost to you wasn't going to be that. This is your transportation fuel.
We don't know that they'll continue to, fuel purchased or reimbursed by RIDE is not budgeted or projected within the school department budget proposal. The answer, what you skipped over is one piece of information, but there's a lot more data that is being left out, and had the budget committee asked the school department, would have been able to respond to their concerns in simple terms. So this is also delineated in the report in detail. So I think we keep going around and around, but we do not budget for RIDE fuel purchases, and trends are used to budget for fuel. So
Okay, then.
Why don't
maybe-
you?
Well,
we don't know if they're going to use.
This
our
is a
fuel.
budget, it's not actual. You mean to say you don't have history enough to be able to determine what it's going to be?
We don't know that they'll continue to use that terminal, or whether they'll want to request to tap into our diesel fuel. It's pretty much what it is.
I think maybe I can just, maybe, you know, an email to RIDE asking them to explain this credit to us will cure our problem. But I don't see us getting anywhere now, so we can move on. A 5, you answered thoroughly. I don't think we have any, we finally figured out what you meant. You're actually, the increase is on each bus, not on the total amount of the contract. So we get that. 7, same thing, that's okay, 7 and 8. I think the next one we probably have a question on is number 9, our number 9, on page 6. The Woonsocket Voc School tuition is budgeted at $298,000, approximately. And we asked how many kids were there. Can you kind of give us an update on this? Because in your answer, you said you hadn't been invoiced yet. And so, you know, but you explained how you had calculated that cost and predicted what it would be, and you gave us the enrollment for the kids at the Voc School.
This is number 9 on page 6.
Yep,
Your question was, for FY14 with soccer vocational
Right,
budgeted
right.
298,386. How many
Right.
students are projected to attend next year?
Yeah.
We don't project at the time of the budget, which again, we need to make note that was requested to be developed in October and November. We use actuals at that time. We put in what is known at that time. That was reflected in the December submission. Students are in the process of applying. We go on to ask how many students have submitted applications and been accepted. Applications may continue. At this point, we believe that there were 10 students. Acceptance is not known at the time of this writing. Guidance counselors confirm with the students to verify students still intend to attend. Woonsocket career check, naturally they confer. Verification does not occur until the student actually is accepted and attends. If applicants withdraw, they inform the counselor perhaps before, or it could be even after they receive an acceptance notification. And 29, how many students currently attend, which we provided that data to, which is right from our submission to the Department of Ed. Total is by school is 23. Although you did not inquire, we have 2 students at Davies. FY13 was only budgeted at 1 student, 1 entered during the year. FY budget submission was for 1 at that time. The cost is $3,663. 1 student at Highlander for $7,203. 1 student at Met, $3,663, and 1 at the school Rusty mentioned for $7,203. We wanted a breakdown by grade level. We provided it. We went on to ask what the tuition per student would be. We budgeted at $13,563 per regular education student. This does not include additional special education service charges for those students receiving services. Woonsocket has moved to a per unit billing invoice by units of time and services measures. Therefore, we do not receive those costs until the student is actually attending. Please note that they have not billed us for this year after many requests to do so. So we're sitting here on May 7th without a bill for this year from Woonsocket for those students. Please note that we're presently in some form of litigation over the system or rate setting. We have extensive documentation regarding questioning billing practices the last 2 years.
So they still haven't given, the short answer then is they still haven't given you the invoice.
Yes.
But the invoices are supposed to be coming out this week, as I understand.
Do you?
Yeah.
Good.
So when you get the invoice, could you forward us a copy of the invoice?
If you make the request, we'll be glad to do that.
In writing, you mean? Do you want me to make it in writing?
So,
Okay, thank you.
so your point
With-
was that really kind of was somewhat disturbing, if I may, is that you don't appreciate that the budget request is to be submitted in October, November, we submit in December. We budget known at that time.
I understand.
I think you fail to note that that's what we do. We don't pad the budget, we don't put in fake kids, we don't put fake kids in special education out of district placements or in soccer. And to date, in looking at next year, it's likely we will be deficit in the soccer tuition budget if all holds true by what, some $70-something thousand, in Beacon by another $75,000. So that really should be, so noted, and it never is noted.
Yeah, well, can we stay on the one topic and not jump to Beacon
Oh,
yet?
sure.
With the Woonsocket Voc School,
Sure.
what was your bill last year for all students?
$375,000.
Okay, and that was for regular ed and special ed?
Yes, I believe it was.
Yes? Okay. So that shows as an actual expense in FY12, $375,167. But then in the pupil personnel budget, it shows another cost to the Woonsocket Voc School. I don't really know what page the pupil personnel is on. Here we are. On page 9 of that budget, under the
What,
pupil,
are you
under,
referencing FY13 budget?
yeah, on this budget that we were provided, I don't know if you have the updated one that they provided us, but on this budget for Woonsocket Voc School, I'm sorry, let me get pupil personnel, I jumped back to the other one. On page 12, I'm sorry, not page 9, page 12. On
I'm sure you
page,
can look at your page 12 because that wasn't part of
okay.
what we're reviewing tonight, but it was.
No, it's a question about the Voc School tuitions, because I'm not understanding what the costs were. You said that the 375 was for regular ed and special ed kids. But the pupil personnel has in their budget for next year $120,000, and the narrative that I read for that kind of made it sound like that was going to cover the additional costs that resulted from special ed kids attending the Woonsocket Area Voc School. Did I summarize that correctly? It isn't.
I want to make sure I'm clear as to what it is you're looking at and what you're asking. The proposed budget for FY14
Correct.
is what you're referencing?
For the 120.
$120,000?
Right.
Okay. That is the portion of the special education services that we're anticipating.
Okay.
Back in December.
Right. So this, on that same line item, if you go back to FY12 actual, it shows $95,000 spent in that. So,
Okay. The difference between last year or the FY13 amount of the $95,000, I believe, is that what you're referencing? Now?
yeah, in
That was for an
FY12,
individual student who presents with significant.
okay, so that wasn't the same thing. That was one student.
One student
Okay.
plus the cost of the tuition and the PCA.
Okay. And is that going to be a cost for this year too?
Yes,
Okay. And for next year too?
and it's included in the 120. or it's included in the out-of-district placement for Woonsocket High School, I believe.
Okay, because the narrative for that one made it sound like it was paying for this one.
Now, that is the only student that we entered into a contractual agreement with Woonsocket under.
Okay.
So the disagreement that we presently have with the Career Center tuitions, that's a separate issue. This student was, we entered into a contract with Woonsocket Education Department for this student's placement in the medically fragile classroom at Woonsocket High
I
School.
get you, okay. But we call it the Woonsocket. So,
At that time, we didn't have a separate line item for
Okay.
Woonsocket High School.
Okay.
So, yeah, the place mark for that individual student's tuition was the Career Center.
okay, all right. Okay, then I get what you're saying, okay? So I guess we have to wait to see what this year's bill is, and then you can, okay, all right,
This year's bill,
if it ever comes.
well, I know, but again, this year's bill isn't necessarily the same as next year's bill.
Okay,
We did budget significantly less than
I
what.
think you need to say that, yeah.
what's that?
We did budget significantly less than what the, last year's bill was, $375,000.
Okay, yeah, I realize that, yep. So for number 10, the charter school, the Beacon Charter School, the breakdown on this, the tables that are prepared on page 7, it doesn't kind of match. On page 6, on number 32, you said 6 grade 8 students are anticipated to be accepted. But on the table, you've got 6 ninth graders going for next year, and then a note that 3 are on the waiting list. So if they're anticipated to be accepted, why are they showing up under accepted, and how is there a waiting list? Or were there 6 kids that applied? Is that what you meant?
It says potential. So, yeah, the 6th, 8th graders this year will be 9th graders next year. So 6th, 8th graders, 12, 13, become 9th graders, 13, 14.
Well, for 13, 14, you're going to have 6 incoming freshmen.
The
But
chart says 2013-14 potential, Beacon, grade 9, 6, grade 10, 4, grade 11, 9, grade 12, 5. Total by school, 24.
right.
5 on the waiting list.
5,
That's what I'm reading.
I don't, okay.
5 plus 3. 5 on the waiting list from 10, 11, 12. 3 on the waiting list from grade 9. So the potential's 32.
Okay, I wasn't under the impression, because I have a friend who's got a child there, and I thought there was only one kid who got in from North Smithfield, because that's a lottery system, isn't it? Who knows anything about the Beacon Charter? I think it's a lottery system that they accept the kids. And when I saw the 6 now, I thought, wow, how did the 6 kids get so lucky? Because it's a lottery.
It's pretty clear, Mr. Clifford. We responded to your question, what's the number of students that have been selected and will be attending Beacon Charter Schools freshmen? 6th grade 8 students are anticipated to be accepted. If you want to cut that number down, that's fine. 3 are on the waiting list. I don't know who gets in, whether they attend or not. It's clear. It says it's not known at this time. There is an interest of 5 additional students from grades 10 through 12 who have not been accepted at this time. I don't know how more transparent we could be. The potential is for the FY14 enrollment could be 32 times 6860, which is $219,520. That potential could put us $75,460 in the hole. Again, you want to be transparent. We're being transparent. We're telling you what the potential is. We certainly hope it doesn't happen, but this does not include the impact on charter school transportation. This will increase also if this number is realized. So, and then we provided how many currently attend, and it's 22. We asked for a breakdown by grade level, provided. Tuition, provided. FY13 actual, $108,230. So we asked
I guess
next year could be some.
All right, I might not be explaining myself correctly, and I apologize if that's the case, but the question was, what is the number of students that have been selected and will be attending Beacon Charter? And the answer was 6 grade 8 students are anticipated to be accepted. If they haven't yet decided by lottery who's going, then how do you know there's 3 kids on a wait list? That's what my point is. They conflict with one another. How can you have a wait list
I
if
think
you
we were
haven't?
told that, weren't we?
Ms. Go was very upfront about sharing about whether or not it's probable for a student to be able to anticipate an opening for that grade or that program. I know in my conversations with Mrs. Go, she has indicated that there are very popular aspects to the different programming, culinary and the theater arts area specifically, being the highest interest areas. And those areas are the ones that have waiting lists. They encourage all students to apply, but I don't know off the top of my head the exact timeline for the application due date or when the letters of acceptance may be made.
Okay.
I think it's pretty clear. I mean, I'm not sure what your point is. We tried to give you the information as transparent as we could. We don't know at this point who's accepted, but I would think it would be important for you to know who's applied, who's on the waiting list.
Okay. Can we verify who's been accepted?
I don't know whether we can verify it or not, but we'll find out if they've made any decisions.
I think they have by other districts.
Okay,
Okay.
then you
Okay.
can share that information with us. That would be great.
Okay. Anybody have questions on 11?
No.
I have a question on 11. Did you
I
have-
didn't.
You answered that. The question was, have you received the exact cost for fiscal year 14 property and liability coverage? And your answer was no. Were they able to give you a number yet?
No.
No?
Never got the number.
When we looked at the numbers, and for example, in fiscal year 11, it was 55,000, and for fiscal year 14, you've budgeted 102,000. That's a pretty big increase. Do they give you any reasons why it's gone up so much, almost double in 3 years?
They did in detail. Go ahead. They did, I guess you call it a revaluation, if you will, of our buildings and our sites. And it was a pretty detailed report. And actually, we have to look at it because part of the report was they requested, because of some information in it, that it be kept confidential, but they did provide a very detailed justification why. So they had to do kind of with their reevaluation. They do an on-site visit in great detail.
Did they give you any idea when they'll be able to have a firm number for you?
For this year, we haven't heard from them yet, so.
When do they typically give you that number?
I'd actually have to,
Do you go out and solicit insurance companies?
No, because it's through the trust.
Do you go out? It's in the trust?
Yeah, it's through the trust.
for the trust.
So when...
So you got no comparative analysis as to cost?
Not yet.
Comparative analysis.
Well, you say you're in the trust. What I'm saying is if you went out to a private insurance company, what would they charge you?
But we own the trust. Your members also. The town's members of the trust, we're members of the trust, we own the trust. The members own the trust, so I mean, certainly if you want to do a comparative study next year, that's fine, but we're all members of the trust.
So I thought the town, I was looking, I thought I saw somebody from the town here, but I guess I didn't.
You also were given information on the trust.
Because I thought the town got their cost from the trust.
We just sent it, we do an annual exposure where we answer a bunch of questions about our budgets and our vehicles and our property. And we actually just sent that.
Oh, okay.
last week, so here it
Trust
is.
doesn't
Okay.
negotiation, right?
The substitute teacher questions, the costs for the substitute teachers, you referred us to the 5-year comparison report, which is that 103-page report with 2,300 journal entries that we had to manually
What question was that?
simulate. All the questions basically on page 8.
Page 8.
Question, unless somebody, does anybody have a question about 12? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to skip.
I think we've got all the answers. I think we've got all the
I guess the only question I had on 12 is, on number 42, of the individuals who collect unemployment, how many returned to employment in North Smithfield? And the answer was 5 individuals have returned. Were those teachers, I'm assuming, or support staff? Because you only had 3 support staff out, I guess.
They're all teachers.
They're all teachers? Okay. Okay. So, no, on the next page, number 8, we asked some questions about the substitutes course and the overtime and asked to have it broken down by category. And the answer for all of those questions was the same, which was refer to the 5-year comparison report, which was cumbersome. Okay. All right. Is there have you, since you gave us that, have you learned of, I know, when you came up with this, that was something that you had just found out you could do with the program that you have. Is there a way now that that program could give us a report so we can validate it against the numbers that John calculated with the 2,300 entries that you gave us?
I'm not
So-
sure I understand your question.
Well, the answer to all those questions that you gave us was, you can find that in the 5-year comparison report, which was 103 pages of 2,300 different journal entries. And they had to be sorted by their 33-digit account number. And John did do that. What I'm saying is, since you have been working with the company, the software company, and you did discover, working with them, that you could print out a report for us with FY12 expenditures on it. Have you been able to, do you think you now have the ability with the software that you have to print out a report to answer those questions so we can compare it against the manual task that John undertook?
Well, what we have to do is we export our data to Excel and we do the same sort that you do to bring those lines up.
Just a point I'd like to make, it would have been nice to know that up front, because I had asked for an Excel file and we didn't get it. So I actually converted the PDF file you gave me to Excel and then validated all 2,300 line items. So it was a painstaking process over a few days.
John, you know that the protocol is not appropriate for us to release a workable Excel workbook spreadsheet.
Well, then-
We just can't do that, that's all.
That's fine, okay,
But
but
Steve-
somebody should have said that at the time. Nobody,
Lisa did.
nobody even told us that there was an Excel file
No,
available.
Lisa at the time said,
No, we did tell you.
at that meeting, Lisa did say she would support giving it to us because she understood it would make it easier, but she needed to check with you. And you did tell us that we couldn't have it. And I think at that meeting, I mentioned to Lisa, under the APRA, if there's a report that exists as a digital format, you have the right to get it as a digital format. So, but we never did get a digital format of that,
I'm
and
not
that's,
sure that's the correct interpretation, Mr. Clifford, but you can get it in a digital format, which means we can send you a PDF or a document electronically. It doesn't mean that the Excel workbook itself gets transported to you for you to manipulate it. That's just not appropriate, so.
well, even if we got the PDF, it would make it easier. Could you, let me ask you then, if you don't mind giving us a PDF, could you give us a PDF of this document that you gave us? The number 8 summary? Could you send us that? Okay, so those questions, we'll continue to use John's. The only other question I had was in that category, was number 17. Where in the FY 13 and 14 budgets can the cost of employing Mrs. Scripsack be found? And the response was central office substitute account for FY 13 only. Does she have a contract? Because I thought, no?
No.
So she's, what is she, an hourly person?
No.
Well, what would she be if
It's a
she,
daily person.
Pretty.
she's a per diem person? So why wouldn't she be in personnel rather than substitute? She seems to be there a lot. I mean,
No, she's there 1 or 2 days a week.
well, on a regular
It's really not
basis though.
appropriate for us to discuss
No,
this.
I'm
We
curious-
answered your question, don't you think?
Well, I don't know why it'd be in substitute.
Because that's where we budgeted. If you'd like to, challenge that, feel free to send us an email that you think it should be budgeted elsewhere. It's budgeted for, it's a substitute account.
So what's the total budget?
I'm sorry, please?
What's her total budget?
Geez, I don't know off the top of my head, but if you had sent me those questions, you probably could have come with that
It
answer.
seems like the questions went out
Well,
do
I
have-
think we want to
On
pull,
Mark sometime.
I think what we,
Your follow-up tonight.
I guess what we'd like to do is pull if Mrs. Skripczak is a rather regular employee, I think we'd like to pull her out of the number for the central office substitute account so we can be looking at something that's legitimate, that reflects actual substitutes for absences and the other issues, not an employee who's coming in on a regular basis. And that's why it'd be helpful to know that number, so when John pulls the numbers together, we can extract that.
So your question is what?
Well,
So she's not a regular employee.
Is she a 1099?
She's retired.
Is she a 1099?
No, she's not. None of our
She's-
substitutes are 1099s.
I'm still confused with what your question is. You'd like to, what? We budget, we answer.
Well, we don't wanna
questions,
cut-
but
when we-
I just
if
wanna
we-
know what your question is.
if we look at the cost of substitutes,
Sure.
we don't want to look at that as a cost of a substitute, because she's really not a substitute.
Okay.
So we'd like to pull that cost out of the substitutes when we look at what your substitute costs are. And having her in there when she's not really replacing someone out on sick leave or anything, that muddles the water for when we look at the substitute costs. Do you get what
Your
I'm...
question is,
So for lack of a better place to put her, that's where we chose.
Okay, then can you
so your question is?
tell us
Move her up.
what number to pull out so it doesn't get reflected as substitute cost?
Sure.
Okay, that's the
Do you
question.
want an update on the substitutes? I do have an update on the substitutes as far as where we stand, actually, as of yesterday.
Yeah, we'd love that. Can you give it to us? And can you send it to us or make copies, get them from you?
Overall, all of the substitutes, if you take into consideration the certified staff, support staff, and we also categorize overtime in with that, we're gonna be $50,000 deficit we're projecting for this year.
Okay, and is that including her salary, her pay in that, or?
Yes, it does.
Okay. I guess that's why I don't believe that should be in there, because that's not a...
You asked it.
Okay.
Ask the question, and we'll get to
Okay,
it.
can you, yeah, send us that. And the other question is, some of the substitute costs, I guess, are paid for, if I'm reading the detail in the budget correctly and the responses to questions, some of the substitute costs are covered by grant funds for curriculum work and such?
Yes.
So is that is that the number that you're going to give us, Lisa? Does that pull out those, or is that,
No, I'm talking about the general operating budget,
Which is-
what,
okay. Not for the, not the numbers that are going to be covered by the cost from her grant funds? Right? Okay. Okay.
Just to clarify for you, when Mrs. Arnold does have substitutes used through the grant funds, they are sent to the payroll department and they are charged off on that payroll period to the grant accounts.
Okay, thank
So I
you.
give
So
her
anything that
ID.
is charged to the general fund is general fund actual expenses.
Okay, so her substitutes will never show up in your general fund?
No,
Okay.
they are accounted for and charged to the grant funds on a payroll basis.
Okay, thank you. Curriculum? I'm on the bottom of page 8 is the first curriculum question. And then page 9, any questions on curriculum?
I have a question about, you have two line items on the, in your budget for professional development services with regard to the curriculum. One is for $4,000, one is for $40,000. And at first glance, looking at the budget, you actually don't expend money in those categories. But further looking at the budget, you have a wonderful person who's able to get grant monies that
I think
seem
she's
to be
sitting in the
used
middle
for-
over there.
Same person.
It looks like you're able to do this every year. So my question is, and successfully, would you be willing to reduce that line item? I do see in your explanation that you were able to use the monies from the grants for another purpose. And I'm just wondering,
Well, we have 2 years in a row received grants, competitive grants that we couldn't, they don't even exist yet, so I can't say that I'll apply for it because it doesn't exist for me to apply for it yet. And I don't know of it for next year. so I don't want to offset my local budget with something that isn't available. So, and some of the grants the competitive grants just throughout towards the end of the school year. So we just recently received an assessment grant, but we were awarded that on Thursday. And so we didn't know about that.
And that's for this year?
And that
For
will be for this
Yeah.
year.
$18,000.
And
And
you-
this will be for above what we planned on doing. So
Yeah.
we're doing like additional work.
And you applied for that when?
So I wrote the grant in March. It came out in March. And we were initially told that we weren't awarded the grant, but then we were called in 2 weeks ago that monies did become available. And there were 17, I guess, applicants, and 4 were awarded grant funds. And we were number 5 on the list, so when extra funds came available, they said that we would be awarded that.
So you leave the dollar amount in there in case you don't get the grants?
Yes and no, because when we get a grant, it's really above what we're doing. And there's different types of grants, let's say if it's a restricted fund or if it's not. The assessment grant we would have probably started an assessment, working on developing assessments on a much smaller scale. The grant will allow us to do much more than we would have ever been able to do with local funds. So it does offset a little bit, but not the whole thing, because we're taking it to a new level. If that makes sense. I feel like I'm making sense.
Yeah,
Your
you kind of
explanation
do.
makes sense, I just wonder, there's very little actually expended in these line items, so I have made the assumption that all the grant money was being applied to these categories because there aren't any expenditures incurred in them.
Right, I mean, I think that since then, there has been so then separate from the competitive grants, there's restricted grants, which have many restrictions and laws around them. Once they're approved, if I have money in the curriculum budget for curriculum, when we think of curriculum, it's really like an umbrella for curriculum, materials, assessment, and professional development. The most important thing right now, because we have brand new standards, we have to rewrite all of our curriculum, the nation has brand new standards, is that first and foremost, we have to write curriculum. If I can get curriculum funded by a grant, I will absolutely do that. So then we can spend, I can transfer funds to buy materials to support the curriculum. It's very rare that we would ever get funds that we could buy materials with that the teachers can use. It seems just very rare. I haven't seen that. But I have to first and foremost have curriculum funds, because without the curriculum, we can't buy materials. We don't know what we need. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess the thing that when we were looking at John's actual cost stuff, it looks though like in several years past, the amount was budgeted and then
It wasn't spent.
right.
So my budget had been frozen.
So I guess we were in a discussion, we were thinking maybe you could budget half of that or something, because you always seem to get the grants and you never seem to spend the money.
Yeah, Mike, it's a slippery slope only because they're competitive grants, and Claire's done a wonderful job. But as she just said, for instance, one year we were able to get a $20,000 grant. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, the state's really strict about not supplanting the local appropriation. So for instance, what Claire just described, was really a good story, because what happened was she wrote the grant that supported curriculum development. By the way, we are so far behind, we still have at least 6 full curriculums left to develop. So she wrote the grant for that, and they approved it, and that helped defray some of what we put in the budget with regard to use of staff to develop the curriculum. But what it enabled us to do, because we didn't have money in the budget for, once the curriculum's developed, the necessary science materials or math materials, we're able to then pick those up. And candidly, we wouldn't have had money to do that anyways, because we were underfunded. So to our benefit, or to Claire's good work, we're able to do that. But that's not always the case. For instance, the new grant that just got approved has nothing to do with what we currently have on the books or what we projected. It's really a blessing in disguise. So we're able to look at map assessments and develop them from scratch. So that's not going to help offset anything. That's all new monies, and we have to expend it by, what, June?
June 30th,
June 30th.
very quick turnaround.
Now, I know you said some of
At
these,
least a $4,200 reduction in her Title II money next year too, due to the sequestration.
I know you said, you referred to these as competitive grants, but I was always under the understanding that there were grants available that weren't really competitive.
Yes.
If you fill
So
them
those
out
are the
correctly.
restricted grants.
Right.
Yes, so those are different grants.
So those are a
And
certainty.
those have many restrictions around them. And what you can't do is you have to supplement and not supplant.
Right.
So I can't take funds from Title I to do professional development, so then my local professional development budget goes down.
Right.
It's just not legal. It has to be in addition to, and those are restricted grants.
Okay. Any other questions on curriculum? PPS? I'm assuming you're Rusty.
I'm Rusty Brown,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let's go through yours, Rusty. The question number one, I think you answered it because we were kind of thrown off because initially, I think in the detail section, it did refer to it as the renewal of the TINET, which looked like a big jump. And then your answer said, well, it's not really TINET, it's another product that we're going to move on to. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I think we asked that question because we couldn't believe that the TINET grant would go from a cost of 18, the TINET license would go from 18,000 to 53, and
And I
that's what.
based that estimate specifically on the invoice from, which I believe I provided you, with the initial contract agreement we had with TINET to show the estimated cost for startup for a whole new system.
So when did you decide to go with the other program? After you already submitted this budget?
It's been a process of communication with the data manager and the tech director and Mr. Lindberg and Ms. Marcotte, because these are all coordinated systems. And with the advent of the race to the top monies, there's now what they call an informational platform. They call it the IMS. And within the IMS, there's all these different modules and ways to access data and information. The only piece of data that is not included in the IMS is the special education piece, and it affects everything. So here we're going to be implementing a whole new RTI process through the IMS, and our system currently doesn't comport with the Exceed RTI that's been adopted by the state. So the planning here before you in that budget proposal is to reflect the district's purchase of a license with Exceed IEP, so that everything marries together.
Okay. As I said, what threw us a curve was, we really thought you were talking about the TINET because that's what the narrative and the details said.
Yeah, unfortunately, when I'm doing that budgeting, and
I hear
there's
you.
been several instances like
Yeah.
that. Now, I use the placeholder, the line item
Right.
as a placeholder, and
Yeah.
then I try to explain it in the justification.
Yeah, we wish TINET was still meet our needs, but it doesn't.
Okay.
So when we developed the budget back in October, November, that's pretty much what was going on, so.
Okay. Now, anybody else, is everybody else set with those 1 and 2? Again, on 2, I guess, it looks like you are able to get grants that you don't know that you're going to get, and then you get the grants, and that's how you pay for, on question number 2. That's kind of
Page
been,
11, Rusty.
that's been subsidized by the grants, same kind of situation as the curriculum.
My grants are very similar to what Claire was explaining, the restrictions. The only leeway I have is within my IDA grants, where I can take a portion of that money, 15%, as a set aside for intervening services for regular ed students who present with difficulty for academic or behavioral concerns. But that's targeted specifically just for those students. That's the
Okay.
only discretion they have, really.
Yeah, okay. Anybody? Number 3, special ed contracted services for psychologists. When we looked at what those costs had been for the previous years, they were, rather nominal, and then it jumped to 28,000, and the narrative referred to evals at, I think, $1,400 a piece or something. We thought maybe it was a typo that you meant to say 28, and somebody put an extra digit in there because it didn't really reflect it based on your prior year's expenditures in that item. But I still am a little confused by this because I guess you're saying that that this is now a $28,000 line item because of you're using the behavioral specialist at the Groden Center? Is that what this is saying?
Correct.
Okay. Well, in previous budgets,
I was going to cover the cost of that personnel through grant.
right. So it's now showing up on this line item.
As a local expense, correct.
Okay. But in previous budgets, it was under contracted services, your $140,000 line item. So why is it being moved from contracted services to a different?
The contracted services line actually serves multiple things. Contracted services could include, for instance, the contracted services I have for the occupational therapy assistant,
Yeah,
the physical therapy assistant, vision services from the Sherlock Center, TVI services, or vision services, orientation mobility for visually impaired students. All those would be considered contractual contracted services. The Groden Center expense had been, as I mentioned, previously covered under grants. I had used them in IDEA grants. I used them then subsequently in intervening services under RTI as part of my 15% set aside. But now we've grown to use them regularly. I had to capture that as a local expense.
I get that, but what I'm saying is, and I'm trying to find it. It was described in this year's budget detail as cost of outside clinical evaluations. And that, I guess, is what it was always identified for in the past budgets, because you never spent more than, you never spent $3,000, I don't think. But then when I went to the 12 budget to try to see what the difference was, in the 12 budget, I think, the Groden Center was listed under the contracted services for $20-some-odd thousand.
28,000.
Yeah, so that's what I'm getting at. Why is it changing from one account to another? Why wouldn't it still be considered in your contracted services account? And is that what, I mean, why isn't it there? And why is it being moved to this? Because it really is, isn't it really a contracted service?
I don't have, I actually brought it last year's. I don't have this year's in front of me.
We're not talking about
So I want to make sure I'm clear about what
I'm
line it
confused,
is you're referencing.
because I thought we were talking about contracted services.
No, this particular line item, last year, for this, the fiscal year FY 11-12, was budgeted for $3,000, and it says cost of outside clinical evaluations at district expense, average evaluation 2 at $1,500 apiece, and you budgeted $3,000 for it. In this year's budget, you did the same thing. I'm going to make sure I got the right budget in front of me. You put kind of the same narrative, I think. And then in the answer, it referred to the Groden Center, but the Groden Center is in the narrative for your contracted services.
So does this have to do with the placement, Mike? Because I'm trying to.
No,
understand the
yeah,
question.
I don't, yeah, it looks to me
So
like
you
it's,
gotta move from one line item to
No,
another?
no.
Oh, okay.
it looks to me like you're saying, we're getting this purchase service on this line item, and then the same purchase service appears in another part of your budget on another line item.
I think, I don't remember off the top of my head, but just as a probable explanation for why I did that. Under the contracted services for psychologists, I wanted to reflect that that cost was more behaviorally oriented.
Right.
Whereas in the contracted services and outside evaluations, that was more specifically for direct related service costs, plus any additional costs for clinical evaluations, such as with Dr. Oswicki or Dr. Smith, for example.
They would be which?
They would be outside evaluations.
Okay. Because in your budget detail, under the contracted services, it looks like you're kind of describing what you described in your answer for what's under the special ed contracted services for psychologists. It says the Groden Center Partnership of Behavioral Specialists,
Yeah.
25,000 blanket purchase order on behavioral cost trends for past 3 years.
So your confusion is just why I switched the...
No, it looks to me like it's the same thing, because I don't get what the difference would be, because you describe it. And when, on your sheet that you have in the answer here for all of the potential services, what is the Groden Center on here? Because I'm assuming that's the behavioral supports, but maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but I don't see Groden listed.
The Groden Center for FY 13-14 is the contracted services psychologist. For the FY 14, the Groden Center, I think, would have been in the same line, or did I switch it?
Well, I guess that's what I'm saying, I kind of see it in two places. But does he have this in front, do you have the answers in front of you that you gave us? Oh, thank you for giving him that book. Is he on page 5?
Yes.
Okay. See on the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph down, it says what I think you're saying in the line item trying to explain why it went from 3 to 28.
Okay. And then your confusion then is with another line where you said that seems duplicitous?
Well,
Which page is
what if you're on page 5,
that? Yep.
the fifth paragraph down, Groden Center Partnership for Behavioral Specialists, 25,000. Okay? Isn't that what you just said is being budgeted in the line item that went from 3,000 to 28,000? Because you said in this, on the
Oh, I
3,000.
see. Yeah.
So it's this,
Mr. Clifford, pardon my confusion. I had 28,000 in my head because that is actually the same amount that I'd been previously contracting with the Groden Center on. So I think I was just confused about that number. The 28,000 listed here for the psychologist for contracted services does reflect the amount that we anticipate spending for clinical evaluations such as with Dr. Oswicki and Dr. Smith. On an estimate, we probably are spending close to $14,000 to $18,000 annually on outside evaluations.
but
I included an additional $10,000 for contractual psych services so that Dr. Oswicki or someone similar to her could provide consultative services for the district. That's what makes up the 28,000.
yeah, but that's the point, Rusty. On the sheet for FY12, 3,000 was budgeted for the contracted services for psychologists for clinical evaluations. in FY12, and only $2,850 was spent. This year, $3,000 is budgeted for that, and only $1,000 is spent. And next year,
If
you
went and back and looked at the journal entries for line transfers, you'd see that those line amounts were actually much greater, and that's how I used to base this budget, not specifically on what budgeting of line previously.
Okay.
So, just to get back to clarify, on the first item on page 5, the outside evaluations, the 25,000 doesn't, of the 140, in fact, does include the contractual services I entered into with Roden.
Right.
All right, and then in addition to that, there would be all the other related services that I contract with.
So the bottom line then is Groden is going to get $28,000 from this account and another 20,
So we will get 25,000 based on this line item for outside of services, evaluations, contracted services.
yeah,
The 28,000 listed on the bottom of page 9 specifically and exclusively is for contractual services for clinical consultations from someone like Dr. Reswicki. I'm anticipating that anywhere from 10 to 15,000 of that 28 would be a contract services of approximately one time a month, as well as the on top of the evaluations that we anticipate that we will fund on a local level for what our teams are requesting to try to find out what kind of disability presentations the student may have.
okay. So Groden is going to get $25,000 for one type of service and $28,000 for another type of service?
No.
Okay. Maybe you and I can have a conversation about this with the books in
Okay.
front of us or something, because it's
The
still,
28 doesn't have anything to, the 28 here doesn't have anything to do with road. The 28 is going to be contractual services for clinical consultations for our teams at each school. With, on top of any costs that the district would incur for evaluations we are requesting for like an independent or clinical evaluation. That's what the 28 represents.
okay.
Let's move along.
Can we
Also, in many cases, we were
what
relieved
time are we
of
up
having to
I've
pay
already
for
got one
evaluations.
call.
because
Okay, what time we
parents,
have?
had their own
Probably about
evaluations done
4:07.
and we
You wanna
were accused of-
Jump to technology?
Technology?
If you need additional data to clarify the rationale for that, I have trends reports on the past 2 years for the kind and type of evaluations that we have actually received independently from parents that have been of no cost to the district.
Right.
And it's approximately 40 evaluations per year
Right.
that we have not had to incur.
Okay.
I thought the comprehensiveness of your answers too from, I don't know, page 9 on was with great detail. But I think that those are good questions.
I'm sorry for my confusion earlier.
Okay.
Okay, the other, one last thing, Rusty, and then we'd like to move on to the technology, but, or maybe we can come back to it later too, because maybe there's more than one last thing. But on this budget that we have, it breaks down each placement and identifies the placements, okay? Could you, at some point tomorrow or something, just identify for us on there which ones are actual students now or are currently there?
I can do that.
Okay, and how many at each of those spots?
I don't understand the question.
He did, I think.
But I want.
Okay, for instance, under his budget,
Yep.
he's got, the Northern Rhine Collaborative, 180-day placement,
Yeah.
and it's budgeted at $100,000, but so far, year-to-date, $2,381 is spent, $2,381. Next year, he's budgeting $90,000. And the previous year, that's the confusion here. The previous year, in FY12, for that same line item, he budgeted $130,000, but only $9,116 was spent. And this year, we're budgeting $100,000, and only $2,381 was spent. So that's what,
Just to give you an idea, there is a lot of I have completed a great deal of trend analyses on all different kinds and aspects of the kind of type of program and services that we are paying for and that we are providing. And just to give you an example, I have the data to support and substantiate the cost expenditures for day therapeutic placements versus the collaborative. And I can show you the trends on our placements at the collaborative, trends that are now rising with our day and therapeutic placements. And it's the day and therapeutic placements that are the high dollar ones. They're approximately $65,000 to $75,000 per pupil.
Right. I get you.
Mike, can I understand the question? Because I thought you provided, on page 16, you provided that data, so what are we looking at?
Because it doesn't, I don't think it fully tells us on this spreadsheet, on this budget, for instance, the Northern Rhode Island Collaborative, public day, non-Ben, and 180 day, it doesn't tell us that $90,000, I can't figure out from that list that you gave us, that $90,000 represents 2 kids who are currently there.
That student in particular is a contractual relationship that we have with the Bi-County Collaborative over in Franklin, and that student's cost is for his tuition and his PCA.
I think you're talking about the other one, Rusty. I'm talking about the top one, and because that's what I'm saying. You have $100,000 budgeted in this, and only $2,381 has been spent. On the other Northern Rhode Island
Are
Collaborative,
you talking about 2,000 spent to date?
yeah,
Well, just to give you an idea, as of today, my budget is 82,000 deficit.
but I'm talking about this particular line item in your budget.
Okay.
So I don't get that. If it's $100,000 budgeted and you've only spent $2,381, how is that a deficit in that particular line item?
You're talking about a year-to-date report?
I'm talking about the report that you gave us year to date, yeah.
Year-to-date, and what was the date on that?
As of February 22nd.
And what was the line item? Because I really thought you were going to be asking questions about what we did.
I am,
so-
because he's listing it in a sheet.
Why don't
in
you
a
talk to
summary.
him
So what are we-
one-on-one?
What are we, what
I
line
can,
item
I'll
are
be
you
happy
talking
to
about?
share
What
that.
number are you
information.
talking about?
It's,
Mike, what line item are you talking about? What's the name of it?
Northern Rhode Island Collaborative,
What in particular?
32205,
Got it.
public day, non-Ben, 180.
Okay.
Last year, in FY12, they budgeted $130,000, and only $9,116 appears to have been spent. This year, you're budgeting 100, and there's only 2,381 spent. Next year, he's asking for 90, so I wanted to know how many kids are there now this year, and how many kids is that 90,000 supposed to pay for it next year? And I couldn't figure it out. I do appreciate, you gave the most complete answers, but it was
I'll
difficult.
be happy to share.
Okay,
It's
All right.
it's cut and dry.
okay.
So Mike, just to clarify, if you want to send me an email so we don't get mixed up on what your question is, but just to clarify, Mike, I mean, it was explained to you in great detail that when we Rusty submits his budget back in the fall.
Right.
He budgets according to the known students and out-of-district placements at that time, which is like 10 months ahead of time. Those are real kids in real placements.
But then what,
So then, what he was trying to explain to you is, at this point in time, we had almost 13 unanticipated this year that have affected that particular line item of the budget. So
we have
I'm
a
a little-
process.
but I don't think it affected that line item of the budget specifically, because you haven't spent any money in that particular category is what I'm asking.
Oh.
I'm not talking his total
Okay,
budget.
I get it, Mike, that's one particular.
That's
placement.
right, that's
Yes,
right.
but that's part of the whole line item. I
Yeah,
get it.
you get what I mean now?
Yes,
Okay,
because-
so that's
I get it.
you get it,
We
right?
have a worksheet
Yeah.
that takes that
Yeah.
budget, and then as transactions, kids move in
Yeah.
Yes.
or go out,
Yeah.
or we have
So
come in.
in language that we can,
They'll cover everything.
in language that we can understand, right here, if you could just, in the left column over here, say for FY14, 2 kids at $12,000 apiece.
Sure.
And in the FY13, just put 1 kid at whatever.
No,
Then we'll get it,
we
then
got
we'll
all-
get it.
We got it all done, we can send you a copy of a spreadsheet without identifying.
Well, if you could do it in this format, it would really help it make it easy. Thank you.
So just
Okay.
in summary, just so you know, we've had 13 unanticipated, and
I hear.
what you're referring to, Mike, is a good point. We probably had a half a dozen where they were budgeted last year. We started the year with them, we probably had a half a dozen that aren't with us. So we had 13 come in and maybe 6.
Okay, can we move to technology, because that's the one that John
I know, that's one particular.
has a lot of information. I wanted to ask him, that John has kind of covered for us, because he's one of the technology people here, so I want to get his questions in before we run out of time here.
Eric, Mike,
Well, Mike's basically, and I apologize, Mike's basically referring to me running out of time because I've got a very important family matter that I have to, that came up that I have to address tonight, so I'm going to have to leave after this. But in technology, we looked at the technology portion of your budget in terms of salary and benefits and all that, and what you accomplish and don't. We've got some general questions to help us understand, maybe when we look at this, just what we're looking at in terms of the impact in the department especially. Is it correct, first of all, that there are 7 technical people associated with technology in some form or another with the department?
No.
Well, because I've got 7 names that are listed as either the director, technology technicians, technology education teachers, or the SDS data manager.
So you're counting tech ed teachers? You're counting teachers and
Yeah,
that?
those are not.
Right, I'm just
Yes, and then the
That's
student.
not the
That's
technology.
laying the baseline, that's all.
If, Mr. Zambrano, those people, tech ed, is it, they're teacher instructors. in
Right.
high school.
Yeah,
They're not-
I'm gonna
they're
get
not-
to that.
No, he
I'm
gets
just kind
that.
of-
Oh, I'm sorry, sure, okay.
So, and they do nothing, as long as you mention that, they do nothing but teach. So they provide no technical support to the department whatsoever.
If
Because
you're
you've got
talking about the
2.6
tech ed,
man years
talking
for
about-
just tech ed salaries.
That's, Rob, that's woodshop, that's, what is it?
Tech ed, multimedia,
Multimedia, it's got nothing to do
CAD,
with
computer aided graphics.
it. Right,
But as I said,
yep.
they do nothing but teach. They provide no technical
Yes.
support.
Right.
Okay. Okay. What does the SDS data manager do?
No, not laughing at the question, it's, go ahead.
A very important part of the department reports. All the state aid we get back is based on some data that we pushed to RIDE. There are so many requirements on the RIDE side. The Department of Ed asking for data that we provide to them. That's just one aspect of her position. Her other aspect of her position is to manage all the data from the students that come into school. In and out of the school, grades, report cards, it's all the data that comes to this district.
Okay, so for all intents and purposes, again, from what I'm hearing, there's no tech support. And when I say tech support, I'm talking about equipment, hardware, software,
There is,
connectivity.
yep, there's 2 people.
There are two.
No, he's talking about from her, I think.
I'm talking about from the
No.
SDS data manager.
She does, I guess what she does manage some of the software aspects of some of the systems we have. The communication system that gets called out, the dialing system. She deals with some of the database softwares that are included in my budget, she has a handle on.
If you had to guess, how much of her time out of a full man year is spent doing that? Ballpark.
Everything that my office does in terms of special education, on and down the line, has to go through her too.
She's
In
about
addition to
to
everything she does.
I would say the majority of her role is, it's hard to say what percentage of her time is divvied up. It's not like she does 10% here and 20% there.
I'm
just
talking
part of the
about
entire
tech
system.
support.
Oh, probably not even 1% of tech support.
Well, she answers the questions for the teachers when there's a question about the grade booking.
Oh,
She's the
software.
She's on the support side of the software.
Yeah, but-
And when Aramark has problems with the data there, she's the Aramark person as well.
That's true.
So essentially, almost her full man year is tech support.
Not systems though, not systems like this, software questions, data entry questions.
Okay.
We can get you a copy of her job description, but not only that, Eric had developed a comprehensive report that's been used at the state level for all the data
Okay.
that we're being asked to manage.
Can you tell us a little bit about the equipment, how many network servers do you have?
Depends, we've got probably.
Well, you should have a finite number.
Well, you asked that question, it's kind of general, but we're virtual, so when you say how much
Oh,
equipment you
okay.
have, we're virtual. We're a virtual shop, we've been for about 4 years now, so our technology is not built on that question, our technology is built on,
How many hardware servers do you physically have in-house?
I would say 16, to be a rough number. Again, it grows, there's systems that are in our facilities that we manage too, so when you say how many servers,
Okay.
it's us plus that we support other departments as well.
How many, outside of the servers, how many endpoints of service do you have? Whether it be computers, laptops, printers, whatever, get
12.
ballpark,
1241, 12, we just did inventory, about 1,200 devices.
about 1,200?
1240, house management stuff, so.
Okay. Now, I assume that you're using some types of proprietary software, but what does the majority of your system users use? Do they use a lot of canned packages like Excel, Word, stuff like that that requires general support, or do you have a lot of proprietary software that requires programming and different things like that?
The majority of our software is proprietary. I'll be honest with you. We have a Microsoft agreement, which means that Office suite on every single device.
Yeah, but now you mentioned software suite. I mean, Microsoft Office software suite, that's a canned package. What I'm talking about in terms of proprietary, I'm talking about specialized software that's used for your particular
Yes,
school
so
department function.
What I'm saying is we're a Microsoft shop. So basically what we do is we sign on a subscription, which is only available for education, which
Okay.
covers all our licensing cows, which covers all the server cows, which covers all the Office, terminal server. That's all bundled together for schools. We get that at a fraction of the cost. And also it gives rights to the teachers.
But that's not something that requires specialized knowledge outside of a tech
But
person.
that's just one, that's one piece. We got,
Right.
we have VMware, we have the virtuals. If you talk about infrastructure side, there's a ton of software that we support to make this infrastructure work. And then there's another piece where every teacher might have a different piece of software, from music at the high school to the business department has their yeah, there's different.
Yeah, but they're not developed.
Yeah, there's a ton of software that just deals with each department. It doesn't stop at like, here's your office, there you go. It doesn't stop there. We have, at the business office, they have a unified system that we support and manage and update and coordinate with them.
Security
if you want to go around, if you want to go right around the department, I can go right around the department and tell you about specialized software. I mean,
No, that's okay.
right down to
But
my iPad for my kid.
the software that you're talking about, does that require in-house programming?
Yes. Yep, to some degree, yep. So that we may have one student that needs one piece of software, and that might take us 2 days to figure out how to make that work in our system so that our system's secure and their laptop's secure. So, and that happens on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, but are you programming different aspects of that software, or are you programming access, user access, and/or connectivity?
Both.
Depends on the licensing.
And to be honest with you, we try to do as much as we can in-house. And when we have an issue, that's why I have a line item in there for support for the level 3, to take it to the next level.
Okay,
We've got enough support in-house, and we try to do everything in-house. We
okay.
pride ourselves on that, to be honest with you.
Has the school department ever considered using managed services contract at all,
I can
to
give
any
you-
degree?
We have not, although I've talked to several different vendors. I've seen the scenario that's happened playing out in Woonsocket, their managed services. I've talked to the director there. The response and the results have not been good. It's just not a cookie cutter. You don't people don't understand what happens in education technology. And I'd be more than welcome to work with anybody there to walk around and see what we do in technology. There is no other place that we take on more technology than any other business. And I will put my hand down and my job on the line to prove that out. We can go walk down to Fidelity and see what they're doing there. Each person has one job. You're the SQL guy. You're the mail guy. You're this guy. We're all of them. We are every single one of them.
I understand that, but overall, in general, are you telling me that the North Smithfield School Department's software systems are significantly different than every other district in the state of Rhode Island?
Yes, I'm telling you that. I'm telling you right now, we have a very comprehensive system. And I've got 300 users that would back that up from
Okay.
different levels.
You haven't even talked about, they're unaware of the direction we're going in technology, so.
I would have to say that I've been, just nothing to pat my back on the back, but there have been over a dozen districts in the past 5 years have come up and seen our system and how we're running our both efficiency and how we roll out our system to manage it with such a small department as well. So it's not as if we're just doing the basics to get by. Yeah, there's a model here, so it's
Okay.
cost effective and it's had a huge impact in education, quite honestly.
Have your systems been compared to any other district systems in the state?
Yeah,
Which ones?
Westerly, Providence, Woonsocket, I mean, I can name them all.
No, I just want to know which ones you feel as though you stand up well against, that are comparable.
So what you're doing is you're pinning it, my colleagues against me, what you're saying. That I got a better job.
No, I'm asking you for your opinion.
Yeah, well, that's not saying the question. I mean, it's like telling my principal, saying, wait, you better than the principal. That's just, I'm very proud of my system, and I'm very proud of what we have in the schools, and in fact, what we have in the town as well. Because I think we
Okay.
provide the same level of technology and brought the town up to some specs for a limited amount of money. You know, I'm sorry,
I don't doubt that at all. We're just trying to get a full picture of what the systems, equipment-wise, software-wise, and everything else accomplish in the town for us for approximately $400,000 a year. So
Sure.
we just want to make sure that we're looking at and understanding
Yeah.
what we see in comparison to what we see and hear from other districts and other contractors.
Sure.
Okay.
I don't think you'll get that though in 5 or 10 minutes, John. If you want, make an appointment with Eric and
Oh, I'm not saying that.
Oh,
I'm just
okay.
trying to get some
Okay.
general information
Oh.
right now that we can take and refine somewhat.
we're very fortunate that we have this person at the helm, and we're fortunate that he's
I don't
built
doubt it.
the structure that we have. And
Yeah.
you said you weren't aware of what he's done for the town? Because we can get
No.
you that report.
Well,
I'm surprised that nobody.
I'm not
in the
aware
budget
of
committee said
everything, but,
that. Okay,
you know,
interesting.
yeah, I don't, and we probably would not mind having any further discussions on it too, once we get a little bit more information so we can refine that. So we get a better idea of what we're looking at, as I said, cost-wise to justify the amount of money that we do spend. That's all, in our minds.
Sure.
I know you guys support it wholeheartedly, that's fine. We're just trying to
But I don't know what we can.
understand and get a
do to
flavor
help
for
you
it.
there, because it's pretty comprehensive. It's not a I mean, this was built over the course of years. It's phenomenal. His leadership was out ahead of everybody else with regard to the infrastructure he built and the whole ghosting concept or whatever, virtual.
So I want to say that, you know, I understand where you're coming from, and when you talk about outsourcing, it's not something that as a department director in this town, it's not a model I did not say, oh, we can do better. I have looked into it, and I've been following Coventry, I've been following Woonsocket, I work very closely, and I know that Apex is over there, and Apex is in the town, and I'm familiar with what the outsourcing is going, and I'm trying to figure out, maybe it's beneficial to outsource some of this work, but what I've seen, the results that come back have not been that way, have not been that case.
Not only that, we
It's just-
couldn't afford to not do what the department or your leadership as we go into the next century in terms of digital learning.
A quick mention of this doesn't even take into consideration the movement as all the curriculums in the 45 states are changing to the Common Core. The assessments are also changing, they're all going online. So ultimately, each school district has to be able to facilitate the testing through the PARC through the use of the computer. And that's and I know for sure if you talk with other districts, as I'm very well aware, that a majority of districts, if not all districts in the state, are scrambling currently as to how they're going to support and be able to facilitate the PARC testing come 2 years down the road. And so that's just to bring that up, just in general. And I just want to make that known.
And I'd actually like to add that Eric was invited this Friday to speak to the Rhode Island Association of Superintendents and the Rhode Island Association of School Business Leaders to talk about the program that is set up because of PARC testing that's coming up, that folks want to learn about North Smithfield and what we're doing and how we're doing it.
And how we set it up
And
cost
how we set it
effective.
up.
Good.
We're gonna be looking
But
at
I
a big
share that.
capital, I'm sorry, okay. We're gonna be looking at big capital requests next year, like huge, coming to the town, right? Because of park testing and other requirements, right?
Right.
Yeah, so,
But as you know, technology is in that influx state right now, so before jumping into some, we want to make sure park is established and we know the hardware requirements before we.
Right. Yeah, it's really difficult. I know,
It's the
I
change,
just
right? We gotta let
jumped
it
to a really widespread, comprehensive IP-based system for all of my business, so it's a difficult process because technology, as you say, is changing rapidly, and you're trying to make some decisions today that are going to affect you 5 years from now. So, thank you.
Well, do
I
you want to do
appreciate
number
that.
2 there on the need for the, you spoke about that at one of our meetings, the need to increase the, I'm not a technology person, so
Which one?
number 2 on page 18. About the 1,000 students, all bringing,
Well, there's a few parts to that. Which
Yeah.
one are you talking about in particular?
well, the need to increase, I forget what it was you said, John, but at one of our meetings, you were talking about this. We knew that the park was 2 years out. I guess we were questioning,
The internet,
yeah, and why you needed to increase,
so along with the park, so let's just talk for those who are not tech term, but right now we have 30 lanes of internet traffic coming in for our 1,200 devices and servers, 30 megs. Next year, we have an initiative that's going on the table this year into next. RIDE has a wireless bond for $20 million, which will put wireless in every single classroom. Right now, we have it down the hallways. And so it's good for our carts, but what RIDE is going to put into our classrooms is an access point which will allow 30 to 90 devices in one classroom to be on the network. So when that infrastructure is laid down, kids will be able to bring their devices, their laptop from home, their iPad from home, get on and start using some of our resources because we'll have the infrastructure in place to do that. Where the bottleneck will be is on the upline. Getting out to the internet on 30 lanes won't be there. So we're going to have to go from 30 lanes to 200. Right now we're at 100 with a versatile of 200. So we're going 30 lanes to 100 lanes of traffic in anticipation of that equipment being in place along with the devices coming in next year. There's a policy for it. That's why that was there. I didn't want to get here and have all the free wireless there and then say, oh, we didn't budget for enough bandwidth, and now we're going to wait another year to get the E-rate funds and the whole piece that we're building for the, so everything's in sequence,
Okay,
so.
all right. That's it.
okay?
Again, I apologize, but
No, it's all right.
I've got to tend to a family matter,
You're
so
not-
I will be leaving it. Okay?
Yep, sorry. Rusty, could we jump back to,
Why don't you talk to him one-on-one?
because it's, everybody's got to hear it, I can't just. I get what you, on page 13 for yours,
If you don't hear from me, you know what's going on.
for number 4, for the contracted services outside, 140. Am I reading this correctly? On page 14, is this table supposed to be related to that response? Okay. So in FY11, you spent 141. In FY12, those costs were only 67. Year-to-date, and I'm not sure when year-to-date is it March when you, April when you filled this out? Okay, so as of April, about 74,000. And for FY14, I understand, I'm thinking, if I'm reading this correctly, you just listed every single service that could be needed. And that's why it totals the 246. Not that we have kids that need those services, that's just the menu which each year we might have a need for.
Right, and you can see just from year to year where there was some entries for this year that weren't expended in 10, 11, or 11.
Right, okay.
So it was just a comprehensive list to give you an idea of the kind of type of services that I might be responsible for.
Okay, so you budgeted 99,600 for this year, and you've spent it looks like from this you spent 74 so far year to date. Okay? Is that agreed? Am I reading this right?
I'm deficit in my whole budget.
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
Year to date, $82,000. As of today.
As of today, okay. So do you think you're going to be within the budget that you projected for this year, which is the $99,000?
My budget for this year, no.
No, for that particular line item.
Yes. For
Yep.
next year, you mean?
No, for this year, you budgeted 99,000 for that line item. So do you think, with having spent, according to this report, 74,000, you will end the year within that 99,000? Because we're talking just about this line item. Okay. Then, if you're using an average of a...
If there was any balance, or there would be a budget transfer to a different line.
Right. But if we're using an average when we try to predict these unpredictable costs, because they can go one way or another,
Right.
if you use 141 one year and 67 another and 99 this year, do we really have to jump to 140 for next year? If the 3-year average is not in that ballpark?
Well, I do know
I mean, it looks to me
that
like the 3-year...
For part of the budget, and I'd have to go back in and look specifically at the detail, that I believe approximately $30,000 that I proposed for the budget was for a sound-filled system to cover one classroom per grade, K through 5. Specifically, we have had an out-of-district placement tuition for a student who had a cochlear implant and required auditory oral programming. That student will be transitioning back to the district, so I'm looking at taking that amount, some amount of that student's tuition to put toward a sound-filled system, which the research has shown are very effective in capturing the attention of students who present with attentional difficulties. So what I'm looking at is trying to help provide services for that student's transition, which is also going to require related services such as a teacher for the hearing impaired and other consultative services, including outside speech services to come in and support a student with hearing difficulties. On top of also looking at programming and services for students with attentional difficulties.
Like if we go down that list, on top of it, if you look at 13, 14, Mike, you'll see, for instance, my eyes might not be as good as yours, but you'll see teacher of the deaf. It's a new expense. A lot of this is based on the changing population. You see $15,000. You see teacher visually impaired, $5,000. You can go down to...
Yeah, but I don't think you're indicating by that column that you're going to have all these needs next year. This is the menu that you choose from for what might happen next year, not that you already have known. That adds up to $256,000, Steve. He's asking for $140 for next year.
Yeah,
So
he's reflecting, for instance, he's reflecting to date when he put this together, you know, we've seen an increase of going from what, one ESL student, we had six additional severe ESL students, so I'm not sure, you know, I don't think he whimsically put down 13, 14, he's based it on, it's just not a menu of like, I think I need, but...
I think he said that's what it was earlier when I asked if I was interpreting this correctly. So, because he's not saying, I don't think you were indicating, obviously you weren't indicating you need everything in that column, because that column totals $256,000 and you're only requesting $140. So that I think is just the menu of the possibilities that will happen next year. I guess what my question was if it was 140 one year and 67 another, and gonna be 100 this year, if you look at a 3-year average, factoring in things change and things happen, the 3-year average cost for that is about 100. And so when you build next year's budget, because it is so roll of the dice type things, can't we, you know, why do we have to jump from a 3-year average of 100 to 140? Can't we?
Well, my concern, to be honest with you, is meeting the maintenance of effort test. Within the CRP, there are, you know, there's a maintenance of effort for IDA specifically, and IDA basically requires that you spend as much, you budget as much for next year as you have this year. This year, we've clearly gone into the deficit in our...
I'm trying to stay on just one line item, not your entire budget, because what we'd ultimately like to see, if we could, is if you know that that's the area that you don't need the 140 in, then just put the 100 and put the 40 in the area that you are running over a deficit. So that's why I'd like to keep it just to one particular line item at a time. I get what you're saying about your overall budget, but what we're trying to do is, in our minds, as we did with the town, we said, look, you haven't been spending this money for 3 years, why do we keep putting it in here when we need it in another area? So let's shift it, and where it actually is going to be expended to match the budget amount will match the expenditure at the end of the year instead of...
Right, I understand what you're saying. Let me give you a couple examples. The first two items, behavioral supports and virtual learning. Specifically, virtual learning has been covered under the grant for intervening services, where I've really tried to help the high school specifically put in some virtual learning components and programming offerings through a response to intervention approach. That has been grant funded, so the projection for that's earmarked here is specifically reflecting that expense as a local expense. Same with the behavioral contract services with Groden, as we mentioned before, covered it in grant and needed to reflect it as a local expense. So what you have here is a laundry list of different kinds and types of services that I'm helping to provide for district-wide. And that's the concern I have for meeting the maintenance of effort test. The maintenance of effort test has gotten much more complicated in the event that I do not meet the budget ceiling from, let's say, last year. I have to go through a whole series of questions, and I just wanted to give you an example of what those questions would be like. But basically, we have to have no disproportionality, which we do. I just got the results yesterday. We're disproportionate in every category for Hispanics. And that alone would not qualify me to pass the MOE test under IDEA. Because, so then that reverts back to ensuring that I have an appropriately funded local amount to provide to have a provision of services to meet every kid's needs, including ELL, and having things in place to address cultural sensitivities to address the Hispanic over-identification. So that list actually is a very comprehensive list of things I actually need to pass my MOE test.
That's why I was confused with what you said, Mike, because he's got the audiological sound field system, FM systems for $23,000, and you can go right down the list. He's anticipating teacher visually impaired for $15,000, teacher of the deaf, rather, teacher visually impaired for $5,000, and you see an increase that wasn't budgeted this year from 1011 for the physical therapist. You see ESL consultation that we just told you about. We went from how many? 1? We just had 6 in the last couple months move in. So, and his previous page on 13, he made it clear that the 3-year cost trends for contracted services, he provided this chart to help you all understand in a short period of time to reflect past and projected expenditures. So it's not all encompassing, but they weren't just picked from the sky. He's got serious concerns here that he tried to match up to impending needs. So,
Mr. Clifford, if you go on the Department of Ed website and you click on that $ sign when you get to funding sources, you can go and look at every district's currently approved CRP. If you go into the district's currently approved CRP and you click on under IDEA and then click on the maintenance of effort, you'll see the difficulty by which I actually was able to finally pass the district to meet that test. We failed the first time, and then I made some adjustments and some reconfigurations. I'm happy to sit down and go over what is permissive and what is not. But the test for that maintenance of effort for this coming CRP is much more difficult, and I'm really concerned about that. But I'm happy to go through that with you.
Thanks, Rusty.
Thank you.
Mike, are we gonna be much longer, do you think?
Well, I had more questions, but if you want to, could we set another meeting, Steve?
Why don't we do this, Mike?
And again, I feel, I just want to explain, I did, you know, I'm uncomfortable that everybody had to come out tonight. I know everybody worked all day today, but there was no need for the building administrators to come. I said that in several emails because we didn't have questions for the building administrators, and I feel badly seeing them sit there listening to this when, you know, I know they worked all day long, so if,
Respectfully, I am the superintendent, this is my team, do you all feel bad about?
but I don't want them to feel, we made you come. Okay, all right.
Guys,
Okay.
I think the whole
Okay.
point is, it is my call,
Yeah.
respectfully.
I know, but you were just
They're a
saying
great
it's
team,
getting
they
late,
support
getting
each
late
other,
already.
if they feel
Okay.
like there's questions they
No, I just don't want them
or
to
that
feel,
they have to support.
I just felt guilty having them come here, and I understand you want to end the meeting, but I just wanted to say, I feel badly. If they wanted to come, that's great, and I won't feel guilty about it, but,
I
No.
appreciate you coming.
Okay.
I think maybe Mike appreciates you coming in case there was a
we
question.
do, we do.
Yes.
We do.
And Mike, my suggestion would be maybe after the report comes out Thursday, that if you want to get back together again, it's really incumbent upon the budget committee, and if we can accommodate you all, great, you know?
Okay.
If that makes sense to you, you know?
I'd love another meeting. We'd love another meeting.
You, not us.
No, well, I mean, well, several other types of meetings.
Mike, honestly, I think, I can't speak for the school committee, but we would gladly attempt another meeting. The only thing that I would defer is please wait until the report's made public Thursday, and then if, I would, you know, I don't mean to speak out of turn for the school committee, but, you know, I would hope that if you want another meeting in light of that, great. You know, and I would suggest if you want to do that, if you could throw that query out quickly, and then we'll pull it.
Well, I stated right at the beginning of the meeting, definitely, we would like a meeting with Lisa and you and the auditor and our auditor and us to sit down and discuss the revenue issue and how
Absolutely.
that has to be handled. So
Right.
as quick, you know, whenever you're ready to schedule that, if you need school committee approval, I guess we wait for that, but if you're ready to schedule that, I'd like the available dates as right away, and that's the type of meeting I'm talking about.
Mike, again, what I have to emphasize is you call it a school department budget. It's a school committee budget that's submitted as a proposal. The school committee should not be left out of this discussion. So, again, when you get the report, look it over, read it, and if you want that other meeting, absolutely send me an email and say, Steve, let's have a follow-up meeting, and let's see if we can pull that off with the parties that do.
I'm telling you right now, we want the meeting. I don't care what that report says, we want the meeting.
Okay.
'Cause we really
I'll
wanna-
pass that on to the school.
I mean, we have to figure out the revenue so we can submit our final recommendation.
Actually,
And we'd like
glad
to be on the same
Yeah,
page with
yeah.
that, so we need that,
You know,
so.
comments about the revenue side that were made to the press, and that will be dealt with in the report. We will say that there's one aspect that we totally, the way that we told you and clearly showed the revenue reported and accounted for in the budget book is so noted. But we have no problem, and Lisa's already put together all of the revenue that you asked to be delineated. That is done. However, it's really important that you read the report because you made some assumptions that you're gonna find are illegal. So let's read the report and then see if we can't get back together
Yeah,
again.
and
All right?
again, we did confer with the town auditor as to what revenue should be showing up and where. So
Understood.
we're going on his opinion, and he
Understood.
does do, you know, his specialty is municipalities and school districts, and we didn't see the town auditor, the woman who does the actual audit for the town, because she doesn't have a lot of experience with school department audits. He does, and that's why they referred us to him.
Mike, but if you look at many of his, and I don't want to go down this path too heavily, if you look at all of the things that were included in your budget report, he put a disqualifying statement, a disclaimer, almost after every one, and that in there lies, well,
We didn't see a disclaimer.
You probably want to go back and look.
Yeah, I saw a disclaimer on two that said you need a legal opinion to see if you could do this, but,
Yes.
you know, and we've looked at, I think we must have downloaded and printed out about 30 audit reports from different school systems, or maybe 20, somewhere between 20 and 30, to show the actual to budget page on the unrestricted operating revenue, and they all show much more revenue other than the 3 items that we've been given, and that's what our issue is. So I don't think the other districts that have the other auditors that are reflecting all that income are in the error. I mean, I'd be happy to give you all those audit reports.
Understood. I would suggest you'll read the report.
Yeah.
The only thing that, again, that just was, you know, I guess inappropriate was a comment in the paper that we were hiding the revenue.
We didn't say you were hiding the revenue.
Go back and look.
No, we didn't say you were hiding the revenue.
Anyways.
We said you weren't reporting it in your budget.
Appreciate your
You're
time.
accounting for it in your financial reporting, but you're not
Appreciate your
reporting it in the revenue. I have the sheet from him, from Lisa, Steve, that shows what you're reporting for next year. I have the sheet from last year showing what you reported. So
I understand.
I disagree with what you're saying.
We'll have to go back and look, but I appreciate your time tonight, and you might want to consider a follow-up meeting.
Mike, just as a point of information, starting in FY15, all of the school districts are gonna be required to report the revenues for all funds in their budget.
Including the restricted.
Absolutely.
Right, right. And we
And
weren't
the associated
discussing.
expenditures.
Right, we weren't discussing the restricted revenue. I understand that there is a separate page in the audit report delineating the expenditure and the revenue that was received in the restricted operating budget. I get that. What we're talking about is the unrestricted operating budget revenues that need to be in, that we believe need to be in there, and that the auditor that we met with believes need to be in there. And many of the municipalities that we looked at in the school districts, in those municipalities, in their separate audit reports, on the budget to actual comparison, on a budgetary basis, it does show all of that revenue in their budget. And the auditor that we met with, who's a senior principal in the firm, looked at the previous audit reports and the town budgets and is in agreement with us that those revenues haven't been showing up in the budget at the beginning of the budget year, so that we can then plan on that revenue. And that's what our point
The last
was.
statement-
In your financial reporting,
Last
Lisa,
statement
no
was
one is
an
saying you're not doing it. It's in the budget.
The last day was an issue, but that's okay. We'll read the report and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and we'll meet with the auditor.
All right.
Can I make a
Okay.
motion?
Wait a minute. We have nothing else on the agenda this evening, so we just have to adjourn. There's nothing else to be able to be discussed. Is there an opportunity to meet with Rusty separately?
I'll talk to Rusty about that, and you can send me an email with that request, and who's going to be present. That we'll see if we can accommodate that request.
Okay, well, he offered it, and that's why I wanted to take him up on it, but,
Why don't you send me an email, because he's also pretty much out straight, and I think he's going to take some time off, so we'll see if we can accommodate you.
okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
We'll move on to we'll just set a next meeting date for the next location, since apparently it's over. When do we want to meet again? Do we want to wait until next Wednesday, or do we want to, what do you feel, next Wednesday or before?
When are they gonna have their report?
Thursday.
This week?
Mm-hmm.
All right, then, next Wednesday. then.
Well, do we want it sooner?
Will we have it?
What?
Well,
We
Steve,
supposed to.
After they approve their report on Thursday, that'll be a public document, right?
It will be. It'll eventually be posted on the website.
All right, so could we pick up a copy of that Friday so we can bring it to the auditor?
If it's available Friday or on the website Friday, sure. I'd rather that we'll post it on the website and you can get it done, because it needs to be reviewed and approved Thursday night, so.
Right, I'm saying after Thursday night, Friday, could
If we
I?
have the time to put it up right away, maybe changes, but
Well-
we'll do our best.
Okay,
We'll do our best.
okay. Well, instead of putting it up, could I just come over and pick up a copy Friday morning?
You know what, I'll see what I can do if it's approved and ready and no changes. Okay?
Okay. I forget, when is the next council meeting? Thank you for coming, everybody, thank you. When is the next council meeting?
John left.
When's the next council meeting? 2 weeks?
It's the third Monday. So what's the third Monday?
Yeah.
The 20th, isn't
This is the first Monday.
Yeah, it's 20th. It's the 20th.
20th.
I think we should meet next Monday personally.
Yeah, I think so.
Can you meet next Monday?
Can I meet next
Yeah.
Monday?
Yeah.
I don't know if I can sit down between now and then.
I wouldn't mind meeting on Monday if we have the report.
Yeah, I know, that's why. I
That's the
wanna
whole
meet on
thing.
Monday.
If you got the report,
Okay, then how about I do this? Oh, do we want to meet earlier than
I
that?
see what you're saying. If they meet Thursday night and there's going to be changes, somebody's going to have to change the document, so it might not be Monday morning.
Yeah, but if you, don't they have public copies?
But
Yeah.
Martha, how are you?
No, now the document they haven't approved.
I was gonna come over and say,
They
oh, I
said-
gotta wait till you guys.
They
we've
said
been
they-
done a long time.
Well, when do, okay,
If they don't approve their document, or if they approve it with changes, I don't think you're going to get it Friday morning, because somebody's going to change it.
but if they approve it with no changes, then we should be able to get it Friday morning.
Yeah, but do we want to
I think it was
schedule?
pretty clear, you're not gonna see anything Friday.
I think it was pretty clear too.
That's just my.
I
So,
know, we need to schedule our next meeting, and I don't see the point of meeting Monday if we don't have that document.
well, I think we'd have it by Monday, because it'll be on the website as soon as they can. It's just physically getting a copy is going to be delayed, but on the website, I think it'll be out there by Friday. Oh, let me put it this way. If
It
it's
sounds like it's
available.
going to be a bomb.
If
It's
it's-
like,
yeah.
we don't want to talk to you until we read the report.
If it's
Okay.
available Friday, if it's available Friday,
But you have to post the meeting.
I know, so if it's available Friday, can I post a meeting for Monday?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Then
No,
cancel
to
it.
meet Monday night, and then I'll cancel it if
Yeah,
it doesn't.
no problem
Okay.
there.
All right,
That
okay.
sounds like a plan.
Then we'll set that as
And
the
we
next
want to
meeting date.
tentatively meet.
And why don't we meet at the town hall building?
So that's 5:13
Yep, yep,
at 6.
yep,
If you find out what's on the website and you text me,
yep.
I can copy it at work. I'll make copies for all of us if you want.
Say that again? If it's on the website, you can make copies for everybody?
Yeah,
Okay,
because you're only going to pick up one copy.
Yeah, right.
And then you're going to go make copies
Yeah.
of it. Oh, okay, that's fine.
yeah, do it, yeah, please.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so now we need a motion to adjourn. And
I'll
Okay.
make that motion to adjourn.
What time is it?
Close to you.
8:01.
I'll second.
Yep. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, thank you.
You know, Mike, when you rave and rant,
Wait a minute.
I didn't
Not
think
involved.
he raved and ranted.
I
you
didn't
lose,
read.
yes you did. You lose people's attention.
No, I lose your attention.
You got that statement right.
Huh?
You got that statement right.
What?
You lose his attention.
Yeah, but that's not hard to do. He wants to adjourn 2 minutes after
He
we
wants to do it at
start.
6 o'clock.
Yeah,
And it started
yeah.
at 5 minutes of 6.
Yeah. Well, Avelia, we've got a ton of audit reports from a lot of communities. And I don't think that guy would have given us the advice that he gave us because he's a pro at it. And we also spoke to, well,
Yeah, no, I read the thing, and I didn't.
Yeah, but is it
I
any different than
think
what
it
we
qualified
told you it
it.
was gonna be?
what do you mean, as far as they're refusing to, or?
The meeting? Is it any different than what we briefed you on? No.
No, it was, what you said would happen.
Yeah, all right. Oh, question. I did that Excel sheet on the revenue.
Yeah,
You made some modifications on it?
I didn't.
Yes, you did.
Oh, yeah, right.
Would you give, would
A
you send me?
revised one? I did send you back the revised one, though.
Yeah, but I don't have it, I don't have it so I can,
Okay, I'll send it.
okay, so I can play with
Yeah,
it.
okay. Okay,
And I gotta call John and see if he's got the chart of accounts. If he has, I can transfer all those numbers over.
okay. All right. Oh, I gotta stop this.
Do we need to put the furniture away?
Was that what you're doing?
Delete my smart ass comments.
Huh? What's that?
I said back it up and delete all